Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the 11th annual SLO Symposium. My name is Jarek Janio. I'm the founder of the symposium, and I'm also a faculty coordinator at Santa Ana College School of Continuing Education in Southern California. Yesterday, we had a remarkable start with over 700 attendees joining us for a day filled with insightful discussions and sharing. Today promises to be another exciting day. We'll hear updates from the Accrediting Commission for Community and Junior Colleges, ACCJC, and the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges, ASCCC. We'll culminate the symposium with presentation from the exceptional faculty at Fresno City College. You are all invited to stay a few minutes afterwards to participate in the symposium evaluation discussion. One common inquiry has been about access to the symposium materials. These can be found on the coach's blog and YouTube channel. I am going to post those links in momentarily in the chat, and we'll send them out with Friday SLO Talks announcements in February. Also, all presenters, if you have anything to share, such as handouts or slide decks from the presentations, please send them to info@coaches.institute. I will post this email address in the chat in just a minute. To all attendees, same thing. If you wish to get in touch with the coaches, please send us an email to this address also, info@coaches.institute. With that, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to our team of coaches. You will see their faces and names throughout the day, and they are here to ensure you have a fulfilling and insightful experience. Finally, I'd like to express my gratitude to Fresno City College for their generous support of the symposium. And with that, Enrique Jauregui from Fresno City College. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you, Jarek. Thank you. My name is Enrique Jauregui. I'm the SLO coordinator for Fresno City College. And as you mentioned, Jarek, welcome back to day 2. Fresno City College extends a warm welcome to all attendees. We are grateful for the support of the coaches group, whose dedication and contributions made this event possible. We also express our appreciation to all presenters and attendees for making this SLO Symposium a success. We hope it serves as a platform for sharing knowledge, fostering collaboration, promoting professional growth, and enhancing student discussions. So like Jarek mentioned, we had over 1,000 people register for this event, and from 33 different countries all around the world. So thank you. I'm very grateful for that. So at this time, it is with my great honor that I now introduce to you Dr. Ghada Al-Masri, our esteemed Vice President from Fresno City College.
Good morning. Thank you, Enrique. I'm actually honored to be joining this exceptional team that's a powerhouse. I am really honored and also humbled to be here with all of you. I want to welcome you all to day 2. I know you've been all able to dive deep into some really conversations that have been inspiring and deeply meaningful, and that's the importance of our larger community, that we can bring people together to do that. That is where learning happens, and that's where greatness evolves. So I just want to thank you all for this wonderful opportunity to join you, but also to see this exciting growth across not just California, but also our entire world. So I'm really excited. And we have an exceptional team, really formidable speakers joining us today that will really help us to navigate education going forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Amanda couldn't be here with us today. Jarek, would you like to speak?
Yes, certainly. All right, then. So here's the slide with our coaches group. We are just, again, so very, very, very happy and appreciative of all the work and contribution to the symposium. You can see how many people have actually contributed to the success of this event. It's just a great pleasure to be working with this team, highly motivated, really great professionals to work with. So again, I can only just express my my gratitude for making it all happen, for their hard work and dedication and making sure that the symposium is success as it is evolving to be. With that, here's our agenda for today. We are going to start with the plenary speaker from ACCJC. We are going to have updates from Academic Senate and then faculty from Fresno City College. Finally, again, as I mentioned earlier, we have our evaluation at around noon. With that, I would like, here's the sponsors. That's right. So this is just the acknowledgement for all the organizations that are supporting our symposium. The list of those, while it changes, it also grows. So again, I'm just very appreciative of the organizations that recognize our work, and they are ready to support us in all kinds of different capacities. With that, I would like to introduce Lisa Rabinovich, and who is going to introduce our plenary speaker. Good morning again, everyone.
Good morning. Thank you, Jarek. So it is with great pleasure that we come together today to discuss a vital topic in higher education. We are privileged to welcome our esteemed speaker, Dr. Gohar Momjian from the Accrediting Commission for Community and Junior Colleges. Dr. Momjian is a respected figure in the field of accreditation, and her work has significantly influenced the standards and practices of community and junior colleges. Since joining the ACCJC in September 2017, Dr. Momjian has brought a wealth of experience and a strong commitment to quality education. Her career has been marked by notable roles, including Interim Director of Operations at Cañada College, Associate Vice Chancellor of Institutional Development, and Accreditation Liaison Officer at City College of San Francisco. These positions highlight her leadership skills and deep understanding of the challenges faced by educational institutions. Dr. Momjian's international experience, particularly as the Accreditation Liaison Officer for the American University of Armenia, adds valuable insight to her expertise. Her academic achievements, including a BA in psychology with a specialization in business administration from UCLA, an MA in international education from Stanford University, and an EDD in organizational change and leadership from USC, emphasize her dedication to education and her broad perspective on the field. Today, Dr. Momjian will discuss the 2024 accreditation standards with an emphasis on equitable student outcomes. This subject is crucial as we aim to ensure that our educational practices are inclusive and effectively meet the needs of all students. Her knowledge will help us understand how accreditation standards can promote equity and excellence in education. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Gohar Momjian as we eagerly anticipate her insights and the productive discussions that will follow.
Thank you so much for your warm welcome. I so greatly appreciate it. I'm going to set myself up here and share this screen. And we'll get started. Jarek, if you could post in the chat some of the resources, if you haven't already, would greatly appreciate it. I'm just so impressed with the lineup of speakers you've had, and good to be here with you today. As Lisa mentioned, I'm Gohar Momjian, Vice President at ACCJC. And given the breadth of institutions that you represent and the positions you hold at your colleges, I wanted to just spend a few moments to create a baseline level of introducing who we are as an accrediting commission. We are a recognized institutional accreditor recognized by the Department of Education. We go through a recognition process every 5 years. What makes us unique is that we're the only recognized accreditor specializing in 2-year colleges, and we work with our member colleges to advance educational quality. We're guided by our mission to advance outcomes, and our core values are really grounded in practices and policies in how we interact with our member institutions. So for those of you who are in our membership, of course, I work with you closely, and we work in a collegial manner focused on student learning and achievement. And we're so lucky here in the United States that accreditation is a peer review process, For those of you in other countries, typically accreditation is managed by the government, Ministry of Education. In the United States, the Department of Education delegates that responsibility to the accreditor, which gathers peers from its membership, experts in the field, who then conduct the review of colleges. And again, it's that common goal of our service to our students, for the public good, and for achieving equitable student outcomes. Every 10 years, ACCJC, and that stands for Accrediting Commission for Community and Junior Colleges, ACCJC every 10 years revises and updates its process. So our old standards were the 2014 standards, and we've just adopted in past June, the 2024 standards. So these standards were developed by our membership. We had over 100 participating members and peers, faculty, staff, administrators from diverse institutions, not just our California public community colleges, but private colleges, for-profit colleges, coming together and defining the statements of accreditation standards and coming to agreement on those standards that we should hold ourselves accountable to. It's this ultimate professional accountability mechanism that really embodies ACCJC's core values. So the new standards, there is a strong focus on emphasizing equity and inclusion throughout all the accreditation standards. It's not just in one standard focused on that topic. Of course, the standards are aligned with our eligibility requirements. They're aligned with practices in US higher education. There are many accreditation standards aligned with federal regulations. And we like to think that the openness of the accreditation standards really allow for the diversity of our member institutions to see themselves in those standards. And of course, very much focused on a clear language, eliminating many of the redundancies. These new standards really represent our collective thinking on what is meant by quality. There are 30 statements that are focused on effective practice that consider the whole institution. We're not a programmatic accreditor. We are not drilling down into every single program. We're looking at the institution in its entirety. I think that's when you look at standard 2 in particular, student success, that's really the heart and soul of accreditation, and many of the standards I think that your community will be most interested in is in standard 2. And there's these 3 concepts that ground the standards and run throughout all these 4 areas, from institutional mission, student success, resources, as well as governance and decision making. The first is really mission alignment. Everything that a college does as it relates to its operations and its service to its students should be in the context of your mission, focused on enabling your college mission. The other is a focus on equitable outcomes. We are looking to ensure that all students, regardless of their background, have that opportunity and that chance to succeed, and that institutions are looking to see where there might be equity gaps, disparities, and focusing efforts to ensure equitable outcomes. And that runs throughout all the accreditation standards. Also, accreditation is based on this concept of continuous improvement. And again, all standards, as you learn from what you're doing, we expect that you are making changes, improving, and innovating in these areas. Again, if you're really familiar with the 2014 standards and you look at the 2024 standards, you'll see that really we've gone from this set of repetitive standards to more streamlined, holistic statements. Our old standards led our colleges to spend much effort in describing processes. and our peer reviewers to be analyzing those processes. In the 2024 standards, we want our colleges to be focused on results. How do these processes impact and affect the results? How do you use them? How do they move forward your mission? How do they move forward equitable student outcomes? And of course, you know, I used to say not all standards were created equal. And so in the 2024 standards, while we only have 30 statements of accreditation from the 127, we've also got a documentation, a required checklist. So there are still some required components as part of the accreditation and peer review process, but colleges don't need to write and describe them. They simply need to provide that documentation. These would be certain things like governing board policies. You don't need to describe to us how a policy came into being. You have it or you don't have it. And of course, you simply append that to your report. We also have several new resources to support our colleges as we begin to embrace and pilot the 2024 accreditation standards. The first one is the ACCJC Accreditation Handbook. We used to have several manuals, the manual for the colleges and the manual for the peer reviewers conducting the review. We used to have manuals for follow-up reports, special reports, midterm reports. We have consolidated all of our manuals and guidelines into one accreditation handbook, and believe that that adds a certain level of transparency for those that are engaging in review, being reviewed, as well as for the persons who are conducting the review, the teams. Certainly, we also have report templates now, and those are guided. There's guidance within those templates explaining, you know, what persons should complete in what portions. There's page number guidance. In the accreditation handbook, going back there for a moment as well, we have a glossary of terms. So again, these are resources that we hope will support our colleges, as well as reduce the burden of engaging in the report writing work, and colleges can spend more of their time on the self-evaluation, the reflection, the documentation, and strengthening of practice work. And for those of you who have served on accreditation teams, you'll now be required to complete and engage in our online certification modules for peer reviewers. So conceptually, as we prepare our teams who will be conducting the review, we want our vice presidents, when we train those teams, to really be flipping the classrooms. And so teams will now engage in this online certification, this module for training, so that when the vice presidents interact with the teams, those conversations and dialogue is more focused on the institutions being reviewed and applying those concepts learned in the modules in real time. I think it's important to also just mention that we are in a process of piloting, and we've got 3 colleges right now who are rolling out with the 2024 accreditation standards. As you can imagine, they just came out in June, and we have colleges engaged in the work. The majority of our institutions decided to adopt the 2024 standards as the basis for their review. And we are learning as we go from those pilot colleges in this 2-year window of transition. I wanted to provide you with just a few, examples of what we mean by focusing on outputs rather than processes. Before, colleges would spend significant time describing all of the resources that they have in their libraries and learning supports. And now we want you to spend more time analyzing with data how effective those supports are, what you're learning about yourself, and what improvements you're making. Same with fiscal resources. It's not just about what your resources are, but how are those resources being effectively used, effectively managed and allocated to accomplish your mission, to accomplish the goals that you've set out for yourselves to improve your student outcomes. And certainly in the example of professional development, colleges used to describe at length all of the different professional development opportunities that would be offered to their faculty and staff. And what we are looking for is for colleges to engage in asking themselves, how effective was it? How do we know this is what's needed? How do we know it's making an impact? What do we need to change to do better to improve our outcomes for our students? So again, the focus on the 2024 standards is on outcomes. In the accreditation handbook, we've introduced a set of expectations, rubrics, if you will. And these rubrics are intended to get colleges out of the mindset of simply compliance with accreditation standards. Our accreditation cycle is a 7-year cycle. And sometimes colleges are like, oh, phew, we got reaffirmed, we're done, 7 years, nothing else for us to do now until the next cycle rolls around. Well, you know that accreditation, you're always interested in quality education. You're always ensuring that you're meeting your students' need. And so we're trying to help colleges think about a continuum of institutional transformation, if you will, apply a growth mindset. And that understanding that colleges are dynamic and constantly changing, that you can apply these concepts, levels, if you will, of meeting a standard. So if you think about a mission, a college can have a mission, and it could include language that makes clear its expectations about its commitment to equitable outcomes. The mission should be reflective of the community and the students that they serve. So from having a mission, if you think about an initial level of meeting a standard, to a highly developed level of meeting the standard would be when you actualize your mission, you're fulfilling your mission. So it's really about going beyond just meeting a standard to developing deep practices that will improve equitable student outcomes. And hopefully, by eliminating some of this anxiety of getting the right answer, colleges will be able to engage in this authentic self-reflection to help them to improve and to innovate. Okay, I am having now my little tech issue here. There we go, moving slides forward, got it. Everybody's faces moved a different place in my screen. So again, supporting this concept of continuous improvement, these are the 4 general questions that could be applied to any standard. These are the prompts that are expected in the report, and all of you engaged in learning, of course, right? It's pretty familiar. It's really thinking about an evaluative process, being very realistic. And as you look at any standard, applying this, this cycle or this loop, if you will, of what are you doing? What was the outcome of that? What are you learning about yourselves? What are you learning as it relates to a particular standard? And what will you do differently? And that is the value in this evaluative process, is about the constant improvement, the strengthening of practices, and getting beyond compliance. In the past, our institutional self-evaluation reports that colleges would submit to the commission used to be in the 300, 400, 500 page range. Right now, we are looking at a report that's under 100 pages. There is a template, as I mentioned, it's on the website. We help colleges know what is expected in each of the sections. Colleges will have to write a brief foreword to the institutional self-evaluation, really what they learned by engaging in the process, provide in an introduction a context for their institution. Fresno City College's context is very different than Copper Mountain College context, very different than Guam Community College context. But in that context, you are all expected to meet the accreditation standards. And with evidence, you will draft narrative reflecting on that evidence in the majority of the report, responding to those prompts and providing required documentation. And then as well as providing some appendices. So again, the focus of the self-evaluation should be truly on looking at the data, looking at evidence, being reflective, identifying where changes can be made to strengthen your practice and improve student outcomes. I wanted to just take you through a couple more slides to share with you some of the conversations we are now engaging with colleges as we conduct our workshops. And we always ask, right, it's a lot of work. Why do you engage in accreditation work? And folks will typically mention, of course, in the United States, there are some immediate practical benefits. If your institution and your students rely on federal financial aid, the practical benefit is you have to be an accredited institution in order to access those Title IV financial aid. And of course, transfer, if your students are expecting to transfer, you need to be an accredited institution. But the bigger picture, in addition to that, is really this practice of academic quality control, using processes that are characterized by peer review. And back to ACCJC's mission and your goal as well. It's about institutional excellence, and it's about student achievement and learning, and helping the public and helping your students know that the education they received at your institution has value and has meaning. It's a quality assurance process, and the students are at the grounding of that work. Our workshops that we conduct right now with colleges, I ask them to think about, and I ask all of you, if you were to jot down in a few words who your students are, describe your students. If I asked you to rate yourselves on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you serve your students? And you rate yourself. And then I ask them, how do you know? And I'm sharing with all of you because you're engaged in outcomes and assessment and data. So often, many of the responses I get are persons, at the colleges saying they have a deep understanding of who their students are, and they tend to rate themselves very highly. We serve them really well, and then they provide anecdotal data, how they know they serve their students well. And what I'm asking our institutions, what we are asking our institutions, particularly through these standards, is look at your data. What story does your data tell about your mission? What is the, you can use qualitative data, but still the empirical quantitative data, and being very realistic about that data and disaggregating that data in meaningful ways so you can use it to impact change. The accreditation reports and the decisions that the commission makes are also public. So this is an opportunity for colleges to share their stories through this dialogue and express where you're focusing your efforts to achieve equitable student outcomes. And answering these questions as you look forward should be based on the data that you're looking at, the disaggregated data that you're looking at to ensure equitable student outcomes. sharing your success stories. We hope in our reports that we will see that come through, how you're advancing equitable outcomes. Understanding how your students' needs are changing as the world around them changes, as the world they engage in changes. And that's why I love the symposium theme and the speakers that came in. It's this sense of how do all of us, how do you as institutions, how do we adapt and how do we improve? And how do we carry forward our vision in the next cycle? So again, with our new accreditation standards, we are hoping to support our institutions' thinking and providing an effective framework that leads to a forward-thinking mindset, a growth mindset on improving outcomes. I'm sure you have many deep conversations, and just as we emphasize with our students, it's, what does it mean to be a learning focused institution? And this is the mindset we hope to foster and collaborate with you to get beyond that. You're compliant, you met the standard, nothing else to do for 7 years. That's not the case. Again, we're constantly evolving. We're hoping to set expectations that you as an institution are holding yourself accountable, looking forward, strengthening practice, and then that is being validated by peers, as well as providing you with rich feedback, adding value to the accreditation process for your students, ultimately for your students. And again, the report, if you think about it, it should be a story of institutional transformation. It is a public document. Colleges should be able to see, what the success rates are of your students, where the equity gaps are, learn what you're doing to achieve equitable student outcomes, celebrate where you're doing great work. And it is that great work that enables us as the accreditor to share with others so that we can learn from each other and provide those model examples, again, in this common goal of advancing quality education. So with that, concludes my presentation, and I think we've got lots of time here for some questions and answers, and I'm happy to entertain. Oh, and I see Susie put in some links for you. Just a quick plug if you're interested. ACCJC is also, we've adopted the new standards. We are currently engaged in strategic planning, ACCJC's 2030 strategic plan. We've got information on our website, a survey we invite you to complete and weigh in with your perspectives, as well as 2 listening sessions where we won't be doing too much talking and we'll just be listening to you to receive that input in our strategic plan. Keep in mind, we're a membership organization. Institutions pay dues to be members with ACCJC. And just like the accreditation standards, I didn't write them in a closet. This is what I think is a quality institution. It was getting the diversity and representation from our field and developing those together. So similarly, with the 2030 strategic plan, I invite you to share your thoughts, participate, and a little plug for our ACCJC conference, May 9-10. I don't think we'll get 1,000 people as your SLO Symposium has, but we welcome you.
Question of Gohar. So you mentioned you already have 3 colleges that are telling the story, and I took some notes because you brought on the slide where you have the stakeholders, the community, the campus, the student, the public, and the peer review. How difficult is it with the new standards telling the story, writing to the new standards?
So I think the challenge for many colleges, and I'll say outright, is everybody comes into the process with their past experiences and knowledge. And the challenge has been how to say what we need to say in a concise manner. And so that's been one of them. The focusing in, zeroing in on the examples, on the evidence. I think one of the challenges that I see as I'm starting workshops with colleges now engaging, and again, I don't know if it's unique, I don't want to say membership wide, but when I've been conducting my workshops, I have been a little bit astounded and surprised when I ask them. The conversation is about their data. So I go on their website to find where they post their student outcomes data, with the mindset of going on the website. I'm a student. I want to know, is Fresno City College a good college? Like, what are my kid wants to go there. What are their chances of their success? And trying to find that information is very difficult. And we're pushing colleges, like, you need to be transparent with your public, with your outcomes data. It's an accreditation requirement. You have to have somewhere posted your data. And when if I don't find it easily on the website, I go to the federal scorecard data. What is on the NCES website? What's on the college federal scorecard data? And I pull data from there saying, okay, you said you're a wonderful college, and I hear all the good work you're doing, but here's what your data shows. This is the chances of your being successful if you're Hispanic, or if you're Black, or if you're white. What are you doing about it? And so I think the challenge is going to be telling this story in a meaningful way, where this is our data, but here's what we're doing about it. And I think a lot of colleges are, they have so much data, so many initiatives going on, and just zeroing in on what's meaningful for their students and making those clear connections to resource allocation. I mean, all the standards now are really zeroed in on it. So you can't just write a little bit here, write a little bit there, write a little bit here. It's really, you've got to be very clear on, this is our mission, these are our goals, this is what our data tells us about ourselves, and this is what we're doing, and this is what we're learning about ourselves, because not every initiative makes the impact that you thought. And then you've got to readapt, and particularly for the California community colleges, with shrinking resources potentially, how colleges make those decisions and align their work with that equity work, telling that story. It's complicated, but you've got to tell it in a very concise way based on evidence.
So true, so true. I think we often, community college, we often bombarded by data. We have the data dashboards, on our websites, but then we forget to tell our story of what's meaningful, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question, Dr. Momjian. So could you please provide more details on the accountability measures being implemented? Given the condensed nature of the narratives that you described, I'm interested in understanding what specific types of documents or data are used to demonstrate that the institution is effectively fulfilling its responsibilities. How do these materials reflect the institutional's compliance with its stated goals and objectives?
Okay, so it's in the chat, but when you look at the accreditation standards with review criteria, that document will specify what the accreditation standard says. And I'm gonna pick on one that has to do with assessment, and a little bit about what we spoke just now. So there's a standard, it's standard 2.9. And we say what the standard is. The institution conducts systematic review and assessment to ensure the quality of its academic learning support and student service programs, and implement improvements and innovations in support of equitable student achievement. This is standard 2.9. And it's the way the standards are organized. Then we have review criteria. So this kind of expands upon what is meant by the standard and what you yourself should be looking at and writing to, and what the peer reviewers will be evaluating based on their judgment of how well is the college doing this? So it's the review criteria, for example, is the institution follows established processes that include analysis of data related to student learning and achievement, disaggregated for subpopulations and learning modalities. So as a college, the baseline question is, are you disaggregating your data? Where is that shared? Who's looking at it? What gaps are you seeing? What are you doing about it? And describing that. And that should be systemic, not just, happening in one department, but kind of system-wide. And then we give possible sources of evidence. So the possible sources of evidence are processes for design of evaluation and curriculum, processes for program review, including, consideration of how disaggregated data are used, examples and of completed reviews and how they've improved or informed practices. So there are examples and possible sources. The accreditation standard helps lay that out, but every college is going to respond differently. And that is the beauty of it, how one college responds in its context. It could be very different from another college. And that's why the peer review teams, they're diverse. They're people coming from multiple colleges with different perspectives, coming to a collective judgment on how well the college is meeting that standard. And that's why I invite you also in the accreditation handbook at the very end to use the rubric. It's not a grading rubric. We're not going to be saying, you're at initial level, you're at highly developed, you're at emerging. It's really just to, again, to think about this continuum of institutional transformation, because you might come to the conclusion, yeah, we do this and we do it pretty good. We meet the standard, good enough. And we want to help push you. It's like, how do you get to highly developed?
Thank you. It's super helpful. And it's really nice to have the possible sources of evidence. I pulled up that section that you were referring to. So yeah, thank you so much.
And the possible sources are truly possible. That's not like a checklist you must have. At the very end of each standard, like at the end of standard 2, under student success, we do have a long list of required documentation. So those are things you must have, you must append. You just don't need to write narrative and explain it. You're just posting links to the required documentation.
Thank you. We have another question in the chat. Hello, Dr. Momjian. How are SLOs important in accreditation, and how, I think they meant to say, like, why is it difficult to measure?
Well, I mean, I don't know how. I don't think it's difficult to measure. That you're the experts. But the learning is foundational. The learning is foundational in what happens right in the classroom, and then coming up programmatically how well your students are succeeding. So when I go to the federal scorecard and I see a college that has only, 40% of its students who are graduating, transferring, it makes me think, well, what's happening to the other 60%, right? And it comes down to, again, the learning that occurs at the unit level, at the class level, up through how you engage with each other as departments and programs, and then as an institution to improve ultimately those outcomes. So I would say in the accreditation standards from the old to the new, in the previous standards, we included specifically assessment at the course level, this level, that level. It's not spelled out in the same way here. The expectation is you're still doing it, right? That there's still learning outcome assessment that's occurring at all levels, because that's foundational to your achievement outcomes of your students.
I actually have a question that's adjacent to that. I think that there can be a lot of confusion between student outcomes and student learning outcomes. Where student outcomes really talks about student achievement, their grades, and the learning outcomes, like you just said, is really focused on the learning process. So could you recommend any strategies that institutions could adopt that would help them to really just understand the difference between those two?
I think coming to just that common definition, and I tell you, ACCJC put in its glossary those definitions, so you can look in our handbook and feel free to use those. That distinguishes what are learning outcomes in terms of the competencies that are expected, or the knowledge that you're measuring of learning, versus the actual student outcomes of completing a specific course or completing a program, graduating, and all of that. I'm trying to flip through at the same time our little glossary dictionary, but it's there. So I think as you engage, just put it down on paper to explain what the difference is and come to a common understanding. And again, what learning is occurring impacts what your outcomes are at the tail end. And so I don't think you can address improving outcomes unless you're addressing what's happening in classrooms and in programs contained within the learning.
And I think you're using some of our favorite words in coaches. You're talking about competencies, you're talking about measuring. Those are some of our favorite things. So
okay, good.
Speaking our language here.
You're the experts in how you do it. I facilitate it and I want to support the work that you're doing, but absolutely. And again, accreditation is interesting, and again, it's unique in the United States, right? It's a profession. There's professional accountability. So we are relying on you as the institution, trusting you as the institution, supporting you as you engage in your own professional holding yourselves accountable to your students to ensure that learning occurs, to ensure that they succeed. And then there's the formal accountability, right? I call it bureaucratic if you want. I don't know. I try not to think of myself as a bureaucrat, but there is this bureaucratic accountability. And I would say for me, there's moral accountability, right? Because the federal, the United States government gives out billions of dollars in aid. Your students receive millions and millions of dollars in financial aid. And if they're not succeeding, we are not doing right by them. We are not doing right by the public tax dollars that go to support those students. And so we need to be again, it's a moral issue, and it's just harder to tackle. It's harder to tackle than when you think about, if you think about fiscal health, right? A college that has budgetary issues, you can come in and try to do things to make it better. When we're talking about learning and students, that human side, it is harder, but that is the noble profession all of you are engaged in, again, with this moral, it's a moral responsibility so that those students, all of our students, succeed, regardless of their background.
We have another question. How can educational institutions actively involve all stakeholders in the accreditation process? What strategies can be implemented to secure their commitment, ensuring that accreditation is perceived as a valuable collaborative effort among professionals, rather than merely a compliance procedure that loses relevance after the accrediting team departs from the campus?
Okay. I think that, again, in the how colleges do this depends on their culture, right? If I'm talking to a private college, what they define as stakeholder and how they engage them is very different than how that occurs. And again, I'm using the colleges that are in front of me, right? Fresno City College and Santa Ana College. But I have found that colleges that make very clear how the work that they're engaged in a daily basis relates to an accreditation standard, relates to quality education is very helpful. So regardless if you work in financial aid, or if you're a counselor, or if you're an instructor, or if you're a dean, what is your role in ensuring the educational success of your students? And through that role, what accreditation, really looking at what accreditation standards are you beholden to, are you contributing to? In practical ways, what some colleges have started doing is, because they have so many different committees, right? Sometimes you can just put on their charges, and again, I'm not saying you have to, but I've seen this, colleges express this has been very helpful. They include the accreditation standards that relates to that committee's work. So it's part of the North Star of what they're trying to accomplish. So that's just one way. I think talking about accreditation in this growth mindset of continuous improvement, that just as I'm trying to encourage my institutions to go beyond compliance, that you also, as you engage with your peers, help foster this mindset of, great, 70% of our students succeeded. What else can we do? What did we learn about this? Or look at this program, they're doing it. What are they doing that we should learn? So again, it's within your institutions, through whatever position you hold, to create this culture of a learning mindset at your own institution. And coming to terms with the data that you have in front of you, I think is foundational. And it's not, it's not meant to say, oh, look how terrible we are. No, you're doing good work, but how can you improve that work? And again, looking at that data at the learning outcomes level, and then also at the achievement outcomes. Again, every student deserves and is relying on you, the institution, for them to succeed.
So there's kind of a, oh, go ahead, Enrique.
I'm just going to piggyback on Lisa's. I think it's imperative that we address, the elephant in the room is, accreditation teams comes in and then they depart from the campus. How do we continue those commitments, and implement what we did and what we wrote? Because once the team leaves, then okay, we're good for another 7 years, bye.
And I mean, the truth is, Enrique, we are monitoring on an annual basis. So every year, every college submits to us an annual report, a fiscal report, so that we can check on fiscal health. and they submit an annual report, which speaks to their institution set standards, enrollment data, licensure, and those rates. I will share with you as part of our strategic plan, how do we support that? This is a question we're grappling with. How do we support and hold our institutions accountable, given the information that you're reporting to us, your annual report data, which is aggregate data. So you're very good at submitting, you know, what's your benchmark, what's your stretch goal, what are the actual numbers? We don't collect disaggregated data from you on an annual basis. We expect that you're disaggregating data, but we're only collecting it at an aggregate level. And we're looking now, well, there's disaggregated data through IPEDS data, may not be the best data, but we can triangulate that. And we, as part of our strategic plan, are looking, okay, how do we support you if we see that your success rates are declining, or if colleges start lowering their benchmarks because they haven't been meeting them? What is behind that? Trying to understand that. So again, it's something that we grapple with, is supporting an institution, but holding them accountable as well to continue to improve and increase student achievement.
I think before you were talking about really a cultural change, and I think Stephen's question in the Q&A references that, where you were talking about getting every committee to really think about how what they do ties back to a standard or connects to a goal as a piece of accreditation. So in the Q&A, Stephen asked, what advice would you give to an institution who's trying to make that cultural change? What are some of those initial steps or initial efforts that could be most effective in promoting adoption and also buy-in? It's a big question.
Yeah, no, it's hard. I mean, I think that it's going beyond the words of student first, right? Student centered. It's, what does that mean in practice? And always asking the questions and putting that student forefront as you move forward with whatever it is that you do, coupled with the data as well, so that you're making decisions based on real information, not just any anecdotal, personal, the experiences that we all bring in, but looking at the data and then having that discussion around the students. And I mean, that's my intent when I'm working with colleges is, okay, how is this helping, how, even when I have bad news to deliver, right? And it's like, oh, we're doing this, and when we're doing this, and we're doing this, and we're doing this, but it's like, okay, I'm not out to get you, to call you out on something, where we have this common goal about serving the students. So how are we serving the students in their academic pursuit so that they can be successful? And that becomes, I think, more critical, again, as your resources are, I don't know, I don't think it's it's not new news, but those resources, they're going to shrink most likely. COVID money, it's financial resources, and not talk about other things within the institution. And I mean, our institutions have very rich histories of doing things a certain way, right? And just having enough people to, keep asking the questions and being vigilant and persistent of, it's about students.
Thank you so much, Dr. Momjian. With that, we're out of time. But just again, thank you for your enlightening presentation on accreditation. We're really grateful for your participation in our event. And so now I'm pleased to hand it over to Bethany Tasaka, one of our esteemed coaches, who will introduce the next speaker. Thank you again, Dr. Momjian.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. All right. So my name is Bethany Tosaka, and I am so excited to be able to introduce our next speaker, mostly because I haven't seen him in a little while. So I'm happy to see him and hear him share with us what the statewide academic senate has going on. So I'm pleased to introduce Manuel Vélez. Manuel J. Vélez brings a wealth of experience to his current role as the Vice President of ASCCC, a position he assumed following a 3-year tenure on the Executive Committee, initially a South representative and subsequently the Area D representative. This year, Manuel is also at the helm of the Accreditation Committee, a key standing committee of the ASCCC, and he plays a pivotal role in the ASCCC's representative to the Chancellor's Office EEODAC Committee. Beyond his statewide commitments, Manuel is dedicated to academia as a professor in the Department of Chicana and Chicano Studies at San Diego Mesa College, a post he has held since 2007. I'm so excited to introduce him. Welcome, Manuel.
Thank you so much, Bethany. And it's so good to see you as well. It has been a while since I've seen you, so it's wonderful to see you. And thank you so much to the coaches for organizing this and for inviting the ASCCC to be a part of this event as well. It's been a wonderful event so far. I was at some of the events yesterday morning. I know that we hosted one of the breakout sessions as well, and it was great to just see the audience participation, to have the level of conversations that we're having. So it's great to continue to be a part of that. So thank you so much, Bethany. Is it possible to share my screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So I do have a slideshow that I'll go ahead and begin by sharing. See if I can turn on the slideshow. Okay, everybody can see the slideshow? Are we okay there? I'm going to assume so. If somebody cannot,
I
just
see a
black
black
screen.
screen.
do you only see a black screen?
Just a
Yes.
black screen.
Okay, so that's not good. Hold on a second.
It was okay before you went into presentation mode, so we can see this.
Okay, well, I may have to just go with this then. And I apologize for that. I won't be able to do it in presentation mode, I think, but I think
It's okay.
I think this will work, right?
You're good.
Okay, so let me go ahead and get started then. Once again, thank you so much for the invitation to the ASCCC for being a part of the SLO Symposium. My name is Manuel Vélez, as Bethany has already mentioned, and I certainly do have the honor this year of serving as the Vice President of the ASCCC. It's been a wonderful journey so far, and it really has been very rewarding experience to be a part of the growth of the ASCCC over these last several years. And that's something that I want to kind of highlight throughout the course of this morning as I talk about the work that we've been taking on over the last year or two, specifically certainly in terms of accreditation and certainly in terms of curriculum. I also want to focus specifically on the work that we've been focusing on in terms of equity, anti-racism, and diversity. And we've definitely taken a very, very intentional lens in how we look at not only the things that we support and how we support our faculty, but certainly within our own structures and how we can look at and reimagine our own structures in a way that, again, supports equity, that supports diversity, that supports anti-racism efforts. So as we're talking this morning, and as I go along the journey that we've taken over the last several years, I hope to emphasize that particular idea. So let me begin, first of all, by introducing you to the Executive Committee of the ASCCC. It came to me yesterday after the symposium. I received a couple of requests from LinkedIn. I guess LinkedIn is the new Facebook. From some of the members or some of the people who had attended the symposium and who requested to, I don't know, was it follow me on LinkedIn or be my friend on LinkedIn? I'm not sure the terminology there. But I realized at that point that we have a national audience here, right? This is just not people from California, but we do actually have people from across the nation here. So I thought it might be a good idea for me to begin with a little bit of a background information on the ASCCC, give you some information on who we are, what it is that we are meant to do in terms of our goals, a little bit of our history as well, and how it is that we decide to do the things that we do. What you see currently on the screen is the executive committee of the ASCCC. I'm not going to obviously introduce every single person here, but what I really wanted to highlight is a couple of things. First of all, this is an amazing team of faculty leaders from throughout the state of California, each of them representing certain regions in the state, either as far south as San Diego County and as far north as Susanville, California. All of these come in with a wealth of experience and a commitment and dedication to serve our faculty and to ensure that the faculty voice is represented on a statewide level. What I also want to focus and emphasize here is that for the first time in the history of the ASCCC, we have an executive committee that truly reflects the diversity of our faculty in the state of California. And that is something that we have worked very hard to ensure that we could create. One of the things that's important about diversity is representation and ensuring that our bodies represent the people that we are working with or the people that we want to serve. And the executive committee today, I think, is an excellent example of our efforts to ensure that we have a committee or that we have a leadership that truly is representative of our faculty across the state of California, that truly does reflect the diversity and the importance of that diversity. And I think hopefully serves as a model for the local senates as well in terms of their efforts to achieve more diversity. Oh, I guess let me bring up my thumbnails. A little bit of history in terms of the ASCCC. I'm a Chicano Studies professor, and as a part of being in Chicano Studies, I always connect everything to history. So I'm going to give you a little bit of context in terms of the history of the ASCCC. The ASCCC's official formation occurred in 1970. That's the year that we received our nonprofit organization status, our 501c6. However, you could make the argument that the ASCCC, the seeds of the ASCCC really began as far back as 1963, when legislation began to appear in order to begin to give local academic senates legal power or legal representation, if you will. In 1963, academic senates already existed in California community colleges, but they didn't have the strength of legal backing. That didn't occur until 1963 specifically, when legislation began to empower local academic senates. From that point, then, the local academic senates began to get together through the support of organizations such as our unions, the California Teachers Association, the California Federation of Teachers, the organization which would now become FAC, the Faculty Association for California Community Colleges. All of these organizations work together to empower our local academic senates, but to also begin to bring them together to the table to begin to try to create a statewide structure or a way that the local senates could have a stronger voice on the statewide level. So throughout 1963 up until about 1968, local senates met under the, you might call it, guidance or leadership of FAC, and began to form what we now know as the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges. By 1969, that group had already established what we would call the bylaws for the ASCCC, and that group had already voted, if you will, to make the ASCCC the voice of the local senates at the statewide level. Now, it's important to keep this in mind. The ASCCC is not a legislative organization, and we are not a regulatory organization. So we don't make laws and we don't enforce laws. What we do specifically is we advocate for our faculty at the statewide level, specifically in terms of academic and professional matters. And we also provide professional development for our faculty throughout the state as well, in the ways of webinars, local campus visits, or through our publications such as the rostrum. But our main focus then is really the advancement of the community college system through advocacy and through professional development. As you see here on the screen, 4 of our stated goals, you might say, are strengthening local academics and the councils of the community colleges, to serve as the voice of the faculty in matters of statewide concern, to develop policies and promote the implementation of policies on matters of statewide issues, and to make recommendations on statewide matters affecting the community colleges. And so those are ultimately the 4, you might say, goals that we focus on, or the four actions that we focus on as we move through the to support our faculty. once the Academic Senate for Community Colleges was formed, the Board of Governors then took the step to officially recognize the ASCCC as the faculty voice in academic and professional matters. And Title V, Section 53206 specifically is where you can find that particular notion. In 53206A, it recognized that the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges has gone through the process of ratification, and that local senates have agreed that the ASCCC would serve as the procedure for participating in the state policies of academic and professional matters. And then 53206B is where the Board of Governors recognizes the ASCCC as the representative of community college academic senates at the Board of Governors and the Chancellor's office. So this then codifies our representation or our role in the statewide system for California community colleges. It's through this particular resolution then that the Academic Senate for Community Colleges has a seat on the Consultation Council, which is the council that ultimately meets and counsels the Board of Governors. And we also can address the Board of Governors throughout their meetings on any matters having to do with academic and professional matters. By the way, Bethany, I don't know how you want to handle questions. I'm noticing that there's things in the chat, but I'm not paying attention. So if there were any questions, you can certainly ask me to pause and answer them.
Yeah, no, you're okay. I'll let you know if something is more time sensitive, but we're gonna leave a lot just for the end so you can have the time you need to get through your presentation.
Okay.
Don't worry about the chat though, I'll get you.
All right, excellent, excellent. Okay, the next thing that we have here is our vision and our mission statement. And again, for me, what's important here is the work that we've been doing to move towards a stronger and intentional lens in terms of equity, anti-racism, and accessibility. Again, several years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, again, driven by our faculty, we began to take more and more perspective on our own structures, on our own mission and our own values, and we began to see how we can infuse equity, anti-racism, and diversity into those missions and values themselves. So through the work of our faculty and of our standing committees, we took a look at our vision, we took a look at our mission statement, and we agreed that we needed to infuse more of the concept of intentionality in our focus on equity, diversity, and accessibility. So we came up with the concept of IDEA. That's the acronym that we use to talk about diversity through the ASCCC. IDEA is inclusion, diversity, equity, anti-racism, and accessibility. And we believe then that it is those elements that must be intentional and that we must place in the forefront of all the work that we do. So we went back to our vision, we rewrote our vision, and we rewrote our mission statements to include those ideas within them. We presented those to the faculty through our plenary process. The faculty overwhelmingly voted to support these new changes. And so now our vision and our mission statements do in fact reflect our commitment and our intentional efforts to focus on IDEA: inclusion, diversity, equity, anti-racism, and accessibility. In our value statements, we've also ensured to include the concepts of IDEA as well. So when we talk about leadership, not only are we committing ourselves to providing a model for leadership for our local senates, but we also want to emphasize the inclusion of leaders from various backgrounds, the importance of having diverse leadership, not only at the statewide, but at the local level as well. And in order for all our faculty to be represented throughout the process. In terms of empowerment, again, we work to empower our faculty, but we also place in the forefront promotion of actions resulting in equity, anti-racism, and diversity. So again, we place these within the forefront of everything that we do. And then finally, again, in terms of voice, the ASCCC values discourse and deliberation, which results in the enhancement of inclusion, diversity, equity, anti-racism, and accessibility. So again, I mentioned these things to highlight the important journey that we've taken over the last several years to really look at our own structures, to really look at how we can serve as a model for developing anti-racist, equitable, and certainly diversity-driven structures. And again, hopefully through our value statements and through our mission and vision statements, we're reflecting those commitments. I do want to take a little bit of time to talk about how it is that the ASCCC focuses on the things that we focus, the work that we do, and what is it that directs that work. This is important because I think in a lot of ways, when we talk about the ASCCC, I guess we could call them misconceptions. Sometimes there's beliefs that the ASCCC is a regulating body, or sometimes there's a belief that decisions made by the ASCCC happen at a very exclusive level. But the ASCCC really does strive to represent the overall faculty voice throughout the state of California. That's not easy, right? Representing 50,000 faculty with very, very diverse ideas themselves is not an easy task, but we definitely strive to do that. And the best way that we can do that is through the resolutions process. So every year we host 2 plenaries, one in the fall, the other one in the spring. Through those plenaries, faculty from throughout the state of California, from many of the California community colleges, can submit resolutions. The resolutions can do several things. They can ask us to respond to an issue that may be coming up that they feel is pertinent. An example of that is certainly the issue of academic freedom, where faculty in the state of California became concerned, where they saw in other states, such as in Florida, attacks on academic freedom occurring. So California community college faculty got together, I believe actually from Southern California, wrote a resolution urging the ASCCC to support our right for academic freedom and pass that resolution at the fall plenary. So that would be an example of how our resolution process allows our faculty to urge us to take a position or to respond to an issue that's occurring, and allows us then to make that statement in support of the faculty. Resolutions also conduct us to specific work. So a resolution may ask us to create a toolkit to support faculty, perhaps in DEI efforts or in dual enrollment. We may be asked to create a series of workshops by our faculty, or to do other work that the faculty thinks that is important. We are asked at times to also either support or oppose specific legislation. It should be important to note that we have not been a lobbying body, and we usually allow for fact to take care of the legislative stuff when it comes to California community colleges. But we have been becoming more and more intentional. And you'll see when I talk about my strategic directions, we've actually become much more purposeful in terms of focusing on legislation and being more active in supporting legislation that we feel supports our faculty, and certainly opposing legislation that we feel either didn't have a strong faculty input as the legislation was created, or that we feel hinders our faculty overall. And again, faculty from throughout the state of California in California community colleges submit resolutions asking us to support or oppose legislation. And then finally, resolutions can ask us to take a certain position. Certain positions can be things in terms of, let's say, dual enrollment or perhaps distance education. The positions themselves are not, let's say, firm decisions in terms of we oppose dual enrollment or we oppose legislation, but more along the lines of these are what we believe about these particular ideas. We do in-depth research, and the positions that we take on are usually to support faculty in terms of how they want to take those positions on their college campuses. So resolutions then are extremely important in the way that they drive the ASCCC, and certainly give us the direction that we then take on to do the work that we do. I mention these because it's important as I begin to talk about our efforts in accreditation, when I begin to talk about our efforts in other areas, because it's important again to note that what we're doing here is driven by our faculty. The ASCCC Executive Committee doesn't make any decisions or move on anything unless it is through the resolution process, and we definitely take the resolutions very seriously when our faculty pass them. For us, that is the dictate of our faculty. And we are going to do everything that we can to make those resolutions occur. Once the resolutions do happen, just to give you an idea here, we do have what we refer to as our standing committees. So in the ASCCC, there are 15 standing committees overall. Again, the standing committees were created through our faculty. Our faculty through the resolution process, asked us to create these standing committees in order to focus on certain issues that were pertinent or specific to elements of the community college experience. So you'll notice that we have 15 standing committees, starting with accreditation, all the way down to educational policies, faculty development, standards and practices, the Rising Scholars, which I believe the Rising Scholars is our most recent standing committee. It's the one that just recently was added. But these 15 standing committees really are the groups that do the work of the Senate, of the Senate, and are the ones that complete the work that are dictated by the resolutions. The standing committees are chaired by members of the executive committee. However, the membership of the standing committees come from the faculty of the California Community College system. And they really are amazing faculty that step in. They don't get extra reassigned time to do this work, but they're committed to doing the work, and they do an amazing job representing all of the faculty in each of these particular areas. In fact, if you had a chance to attend yesterday morning's breakout session for the Accreditation Committee, you'll see that members of our Accreditation Committee got together and developed that particular breakout session, did a wonderful job. And for me, that's something that's beautiful about the standing committees, because it's in a way how our faculty in the California Community College system can get involved in the statewide work, can give more input in terms of the work that's happening at a statewide level, and certainly, I think most importantly, lend their expertise to the work that we're doing to ensure that the faculty voice is strong. All right, having said all that, then it can now take me down to the Accreditation Committee, which is where I really want to begin to put my focus here. Of all the standing committees, I'm not going to focus on the other 14, though all of them do great work. All of them certainly do work that impacts accreditation and curriculum, but I do want to place more emphasis on the Accreditation Committee, since certainly this is a SLO symposium, and we just had that wonderful presentation by Dr. Momjian this morning from the ACCJC. The Accreditation Committee is one of the standing committees of the ASCCC, and is specifically the committee that's charged with looking at accreditation and supporting our faculty through the accreditation process in our California community colleges. So we work very closely with the ACCJC. In fact, one of the liaisons who sits in the Accreditation Committee, Kevin Buttonball, represents the ACCJC. He's a ACCJC representative on the Accreditation Committee. So we work very closely with the ACCJC in order to support our faculty through accreditation processes to ensure that our faculty are aware and well-informed on accreditation, and certainly to give our faculty help and support as they complete their accreditation processes, as they write up their ICERs, as they volunteer to become, as they volunteer to go out and become accreditors or accreditation, what's the word I'm looking for, researchers themselves. So we definitely treasure the work that we do with the ACCJC, and it's through our Accreditation Committee that we most certainly try to work with our faculty to ensure that they are doing well in their accreditation. So over the last several years, I want to just point out some of the things that the Accreditation Committee has been able to do in support of our faculty, and again, specifically in terms of the new standards that the ACCJC is coming out and supporting our faculty in their processes. We've authored a total of 5 articles over the last several years, specifically having to do with accreditation, including an article that we published in April of 2023 entitled Social Justice and Accreditation. That one you can find at the, if you click on, you'll have access to this website, to this slideshow later, but if you click on this Senate rostrum image here, it'll take you to the ASCCC rostrum site where you can download any one of the rostrum articles that I'm mentioning. But in April of 2023, we published a rostrum article entitled Social Justice and Accreditation, where the focus specifically is on the new social justice standards from the ACCJC and our conversation about those standards specifically. that certainly is, I think, a hot topic right now when it comes to ACCJC accreditation, is those social justice standards. So for us, it's important to ensure that we are talking about those standards, that we are publishing articles on the standards, and that our faculty are well aware of those social justice standards so that they can address them within their own accreditation processes. We've also published an article on accreditation to support innovation. We've published an article comparing the new standards to the old standards. And we've also published an article supporting local academic senate social justice efforts in terms of accreditation as well. So the rostrum has certainly served as an avenue for us to give more information to our faculty in regards to the new standards that are coming in through the ACCJC, and to also offer them suggestions and support as they're working on their accreditation processes. We've also hosted a number of webinars that we entitled the Accreditation Coffee Break. We hosted, I believe, 5 of them in 2022, where again, together with the ACCJC, we had webinars, we welcomed faculty to come in. Faculty had the opportunity to ask questions about the new standards. They had an opportunity to have conversations with members of the ACCJC, and again, hopefully to give them a better support as they were beginning to understand the new standards that were coming in. This September, we hosted the 2023 Accreditation Institute. This is an institute that we co-host together with the ACCJC. I think every other year, we take on the institute itself. In 2023, we decided to make the Accreditation Institute a virtual institute, and we focused on a one-day event. And the emphasis on the 2023 Accreditation Institute was the new ACCJC standards and helping our faculty prepare for those standards. Some of the sessions that we focused on for that particular event were effective strategies in presenting disaggregated data to tell the story of your institution. We had one breakout session that focused specifically on ACCJC's social justice policy and enhancing racial equity in accreditation. We had another breakout session on distance education, faculty, students, and accreditation. And then we also had a wonderful presentation by Dr. Momjian, who gave the presentation earlier this morning, together with Kevin Botenbaugh from the ACCJC, specifically on the newly adopted 2024 standards. So again, our emphasis through the accreditation committee has certainly been to try to give our faculty as much information as possible about the new standards, to ensure that they're prepared for those new standards, and certainly to give them the opportunity to directly ask questions of members of the ACCJC to get answers to any questions that they have about the new standards as well. And then certainly again, through our plenary sessions, we have developed breakout sessions focused specifically on accreditation. We've asked the ACCJC to work together with us on these sessions. So in our fall plenary session, we had accreditation breakout sessions. We've had them in our Curriculum Institute and our Faculty Leadership Institute. And certainly again, it's through these processes that we hope to keep our faculty abreast, informed, and prepared and engaged for any of the accreditation processes, and certainly any changes that are coming in regards to the new standards themselves. Okay, I want to take a little bit of focus now on the the ASCCC and our relationship with the Community College Chancellor's Office and Chancellor Sonia Christian's Vision 2030. I'm sure by now everybody's already familiar with Vision 2030. Again, in case there's anybody who's not familiar with Vision 2030, Chancellor Sonia Christian, who just took on the role of our Chancellor for the California Community Colleges, introduced the Vision 2030, which is her 5-year vision for the community college system. The Vision 2030 definitely does take on from the previous Chancellor's vision, which he referred to as a vision for success, and certainly does emphasize the equity portion of the vision for success. Vision 2030, the action plan intends to focus specifically on placing equity at the forefront of 3 main areas: success, access, and support. And it's hoping to encourage work towards 3 strategic directions: equitable baccalaureate attainment, equitable workforce and economic development, and generative AI. So the ASCCC then has been working together with the Chancellor's Office in order to do a couple of things. First of all, to really explore how it is that our faculty can become more involved in the exploration of these particular directions, and certainly to become how it is that we can support, but also be critical of these directions, and how it is that we can begin to give input on the directions themselves. Over the last several years, certainly the ASCCC has already been working on some of the actions that are identified in the strategic directions, including dual enrollment, rising scholars, the credit for prior learning programs, and career education. So a lot of the work that's already listed in Vision 2030 is work that we have already been doing over the last several years. And we are certainly happy to see that the Chancellor is placing more emphasis on that work, and that she is willing to give resources in order to continue that work as well. I will mention that two areas, I believe, where our faculty are certainly, I guess I'll use the word concern, but I'll say where our faculty certainly want to have the stronger input is certainly in generative AI, and also specifically in dual enrollment. Chancellor Christian's vision for dual enrollment is that she hopes that every high school student from the 9th grade all the way up will at some point have a dual enrolled class within their transcript. We certainly support that, but certainly our faculty have some concerns over 9th grade students taking college level courses. And so we have certainly engaged with the Chancellor over these conversations. We've made sure that our faculty have had an opportunity to give their input in that particular area. And we certainly have, I think, done enough to address the concern in a way that the Chancellor has responded. The Chancellor's office's focus now is more that if we're talking about dual enrollment in the 9th grade, we're talking more about college prep, getting 9th grade students to begin to think about career options, and perhaps begin to get them to think about what might their majors be once they begin to start to think about college. So fortunately then, through the process of faculty input, we're able to try to fine tune specifically Chancellor Christian's dual enrollment goals and focus more on it in a way that faculty feel a little bit more comfortable with. Generative AI, I think, is going to be the topic of the millennia, right? That's going to be the topic that I think is the most interesting for several reasons. One, because it does seem that AI is just simply unleashed and it's difficult to try to slow it down. But secondly, it is something that generates either a lot of support or a lot of opposition. And certainly within our faculty in the state of California, that support and that opposition exists as well. And so it's important for us, certainly as the ASCCC, to make sure that we're listening closely to what our faculty feel about AI, and definitely giving a perspective of generative AI that not only talks about the, you might say, the excitement that we may feel for it, but also focuses on our concerns, and that we are addressing those concerns as well. So again, all of these particular strategic directions, we are working on them to some degree, and we are trying to ensure that our faculty, that their concerns, that their input, that their perspectives are being a part of that as well. I will say that the Chancellor's Office has really been amazing in terms of reaching out to us and asking us to to include our support in Vision 2030 itself. The Chancellor has often referred to Vision 2030 as a working document, which for us is definitely a very, very good way of looking at it, because it allows us to continue to give input on the document. It allows us to not see the document as this kind of set in stone, absolute document, but one that we can continue to work on, one that we can continue to receive input about and provide feedback to the Chancellor's Office for. And so we are definitely grateful for the Chancellor's Office for that particular perspective. We do agree that looking at the Vision 2030 as a working plan is an effective way of ensuring that all the constituent voices are involved in it, and that all of them are engaged and giving the input that's necessary for Vision 2030 to be a success. I also want to kind of point out that the Chancellor has really, I think, gone above and beyond her efforts to ensure that the ASCCC has specifically been involved in these conversations. She organized a series of summits throughout the fall semester where she was introducing Vision 2030. And in each of those summits, she ensured that a representative of the ASCCC was there, where we were able, again, to bring in faculty from the local colleges to express their perspectives and their concerns in regards to some of the Vision 2030 elements, certainly dual enrollment, certainly generative AI. But again, it was a definitely wonderful opportunity for us to be a part of these conversations and for us to allow our faculty to be a part of these conversations as well. Ultimately, in November of 2023, during our fall plenary, our faculty did in fact introduce a resolution expressing our support for the Vision 2030 goals and the strategic directions. That resolution was submitted and it was ultimately passed, I believe unanimously, if not unanimously, with a very, very large support. So our faculty, through our resolution process, voted to support the Vision 2030 goals strategic directions. Bethany, how am I doing on time? Am I okay on time, or?
You're actually doing great on time. Our previous one ended a tiny bit early, so if you're good, we're good.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
very good. Okay, so my next focus then is on some of the work that we've been doing together with the Chancellor's Office over the last semester. And I want to focus on two particular task forces that we've been working with through the Chancellor's Office. The first one is the Common Course Numbering Task Force. And yes, that's at the bottom of the list, but I want to mention it first because that work has kind of come to its end. The Common Course Numbering Task Force was actually a task force that was created in 2022 after AB 1111, a bill, I think it was submitted by Mark Berman, was passed at the California Assembly. AB 1111 was a bill that urged the California community colleges to create a common course numbering system for all of our courses in the community college system. I'm sure that makes sense, but just in case it doesn't, what that means is that if you have an English composition course, let's say an expository English composition course at a California community college, currently every district has a different number for that course. So you might take a course at San Diego Mesa College, that's an English composition course, but at Mesa College, that's English 101. Whereas at, let's say, College of the Sequoias, they might use a completely different numbering system. That might be English 9 or something like that. And so the Common Course Numbering bill urges the California Community College system to create a common course number for all of our courses. So expository English composition would have the same number in every single one of our community colleges. This certainly does have an impact in terms of transfer. And thus, when we talk about common course numbering, we do also have to bring in the Cal State systems and the UC systems, because certainly many of our students are transferring into those systems. And so you can imagine it's definitely a pretty daunting task to try to create a common course numbering system that would certainly satisfy all of the community colleges within our system, as well as the other systems, higher education systems within California. The Common Course Numbering Task Force was developed, was organized by the Chancellor's Office. It did include representatives of the California Community College system, as well as representatives from the UCs and the CSUs. They were tasked with coming up with recommendations for a common course numbering system by July of 2024. So they've got a couple of months before their deadline shows up. The group has been working since 2022. And all the way, I think they worked all the way up until December of 2023 when they finally finished their recommendations. The first of their recommendations is that we're not going to have this done by 2024. So their first recommendation is to extend the deadline to 2025. However, the set of recommendations is set. It is now moved over towards the Board of Governors, who are then, their next job is to approve or turn down the recommendations made by the Common Course Numbering Task Force. So we're just waiting for the Board of Governors to hear about that decision. But hopefully, ultimately, we are now at the very beginning of the process to begin to see common course numbering, at least within the California community colleges.
Could I actually stop you real fast right there? I did get a question about how SLOs are being tackled within this common course numbering process. Do you have any maybe updates that relate to that?
I don't, Bethany, but that definitely does point to the complexities because if we're talking about common course numberings, SLOs should not have anything to do with the common course numbering, right? The number that designates the course should be completely separate from the learning objectives that the courses are driven by. So the basic answer is there's nothing. There's no impact between the SLOs and the common course numbering. On a more, let's say, hypothetical or on a more kind of a nebulous basis, there are questions about, as we begin to move more and more towards common course numbering, as well as towards degree pathways, are community colleges then having to shift their learning objectives or their course outline of records in ways that the CSUs or the USCs use instead? But we're not there yet. So I would say that at this point, there is no connection whatsoever between common course numbering and SLOs.
Thank you. Are they, there's a little bit of talk though about the content, right? Some of like the descriptions aligning. Do you think that maybe SLOs could be on the horizon? So once the numbers align and then the descriptions align, is it possible that that's where we're going?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Remember that SLOs are specific to the community colleges, right? The CSUs and UCs don't have SLOs. And so if anything, right, the SLOs would, I think they would stick within the community college system. But I don't think, at this point, I don't think that there'd be any kind of like move to either make SLOs for all the system or any move to remove SLOs from the community colleges. I do see Enrique Jauregui has a something.
Manuel, quick question. Yes. So when we were piggyback on Bethany's thing, the Common Core for the numbering, but I heard something with the having the objectives being common among courses.
Again, those are two separate things, right? The number and the objectives are two separate things. And I do hear also that there is a move to making SLOs from the CSUs more specific to the CSUs themselves. I'm thinking that we're hinting at the ethnic studies things, right? Where the CSUs for Area F are, in order for a community college Area F course to be accepted as an Area F course, CSUs are kind of requiring that their SLOs have specific words or specific verbiage in them. And so I think that's a concern, but that has nothing to do at this point with common course numbering. So I definitely want to make sure that we're kind of talking about two separate things here. Yes, I think you're correct. There seems to be this kind of move toward this, let's call it homogenization of all our courses across the system, but this is not yet there. This is just about the numbering system.
Thank you.
Any others? And certainly I think the questions point to how complicated this whole common course numbering system is. There have been attempts to do this since the 1980s, and none of the attempts have been successful up until now. So I would say that there are a lot of definite complicated things that we have to keep in mind with common course numbering. The concerns that you're all bringing up, I think, are valid, but I don't think that we're there yet.
And I do just want to acknowledge Leanne made a comment as well, and I think it's related to what you just said, asking how do we say a student took the same course if their outcomes are different. So I think that lines with what you just said, and there are a lot of very valid questions that are happening that we maybe don't have the full answer to yet because it hasn't fully happened. So maybe a follow-up that I would have is, where can people send these very valid questions so that they're heard by the right people who are making these decisions? How can they get involved in the process, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so at this point, the recommendations have already moved on from the task force. So the better thing to do now is perhaps reach out to the Board of Governors, because these recommendations will move to the Board of Governors. The Board of Governors will vote on these recommendations. So a faculty who wants to have input at this point, their best bet is to pay attention to the Board of Governors schedule, see when this shows up on the agenda, and make a public comment. And during the public comments, give your perspective. Any other comments, anything on the Common Course Numbering Task Force?
I think it's just the similar feelings of there's just a lot of questions. I think maybe another recommendation to throw out there is make sure your college is aware of these things that are coming up. So this is why we want to hear from ASCCC is if this is the first you're hearing of Common Course numbering, it's possible that other people at your institution are in the same place, and you want to make sure your local academic senates are very informed so that you can have a voice, or you can work to go talk to the Board of Governors or whatever that might look like for your institution. But information is very important, so make sure you're taking this back to the people who need to hear it at your schools.
Yes, I most definitely agree with you, Bethany. And unfortunately, right at this point, the task force has already completed its job. So if you're just finding out, then you kind of reached it at the tail end before you could give that input on the recommendations. But you're still at a point where you can reach out to the Board of Governors, let them know how you feel about it. I believe you can find the recommendations. If not, I'll try to link them to this website, but I think you can find them at the ASCCC website as well. But yeah, at this point, the best bet is to wait to see when it shows up on the Board of Governors agenda.
Manu, quick question on those recommendations that you mentioned. Any things that popped out from the Board of Governors?
Oh, nothing that I would be able to give you very quickly, okay. Enrique. So I'll urge you to take a look on your own. But okay. Again, it's a complicated thing. Enrique, by the way, I did just very quickly because you raised your hand already. My middle name is Jauregui. So to see someone with the last name of Jauregui is.
Whoa. Okay.
You're my primo, okay? Any other questions on the Common Course Numbering Task Force?
I think you're okay to keep going.
All right. The other task force we have definitely been very active in over the last semester is the Universal Design for Learning Task Force, which is a task force that was put together by the Chancellor's Office. It certainly does have representatives from a wide range of constituents within the California Community College system. The Academic Senate, I'm there representing the Academic Senate. We have representatives from the Student Senate on that task force, representatives from Classified, from the Disability Services. It is definitely a task force that has a strong representation. And the ultimate purpose of the task force is to develop an ultimate plan of action to recommend to the Chancellor's Office on how to implement universal design for learning across our California community colleges. If you are not familiar with universal design for learning, it is a concept that was developed by a group called CAST. The concept actually began as an architectural concept, and it began with the idea of creating buildings that are accessible for everybody, but doing that from the very beginning of the design itself, which is why it's called universal design, right? In terms of architecture, then, if you think about designing a building, if you're designing a building that already has, let's say, disability in mind, then you might have a building with, let's say, sliding glass doors or with ramps or things such as that, so that the building doesn't have to be modified afterwards to accommodate those particular accessibility patrons, right? In universal design for learning, then, it's the basic same concept, but applying it to curriculum. How do we develop a curriculum that doesn't react to, let's say, the students that are coming into the classroom, but one that is already modeled in a way that includes every single student coming into the classroom? And certainly this is from the accessibility position, right? So when we're talking about students who have, let's say, disability designations, such as they might have hearing impairment or they might have vision issues, how do we design curriculum in a way that already considers those students before they even walk into the classroom, right? Universal design for learning also takes into the concept of representation in the classroom for students of color. So how to create a classroom or how to create a curriculum that is inclusive for every single student, regardless of accessibility, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of gender. How do we create a curriculum that is truly, truly universal? And again, prior to the students coming into it. That really is the basic idea behind universal design for learning. What's interesting about it is that It's a concept that has definitely focused much more on curriculum, even though I think architecture still uses universal design. Universal design for learning has really taken a hold at a national level, and we're beginning more and more to see colleges and universities implement universal design for learning within their classrooms and within their curriculums. I will say that since I've been working on this task force, I don't see it very strongly in our California community colleges yet. In other words, I've not heard of a lot of our colleges using UDL systems. I'm familiar with a few of our professors or faculty who are using UDL ideas in some of their curriculum, but there has not yet really been a statewide concerted movement towards UDL. And I believe that the Chancellor's Office would like to see that movement occurring. And so the purpose of the UDL task force then is to create a plan of action and to make recommendations for the Chancellor's Office, ultimately on how it is that we can implement, encourage, and ultimately see UDL for curriculum across our California community colleges. You know, I'm going to ask very quickly, if anybody does use UDL, could you let us know in the chat? Bethany, will you kind of keep track of that? I'd like to see if maybe in this room, I'll find a wealth of people actually using UDL. The UDL task force is continuing to meet. In fact, they have a meeting this Monday where they will meet again to discuss the recommendations that they're developing. They've already got a draft of the recommendations. I should say we, since I'm working on the task force as well. We've already developed a task of the recommendations, a draft. We will go over that draft on Monday. We will begin to finalize that draft. And then we will have one final meeting in March and then present our recommendations to the Chancellor's Office, I believe in May.
You've already got 4 people in the chat who use it, and 2 of them are part of the coaches group. We had a presentation on it in one of our Friday SLO talks. So you have found the right people, Manuel.
Well, 4 is already twice as many as I had. So that's, we've doubled the amount of people who are using UDL. But I would say if you're using UDL, reach out to me, send me an email, because I'm going to begin organizing webinars and I want to feature our faculty who are using UDL, and I want to feature those best practices. So those 4, I'm expecting emails from you. Send me an email, let me know if you're interested, so that when I start to organize these webinars, I can reach out to you so that you can help us out in letting our faculty know what UDL is and what are the best ways of using UDL in their classroom. Okay, let me go ahead and keep going. I'm trying to be conscious of time here. So Dr. Momjian at the end of her presentation mentioned that the ACCJC is going through their own strategic directions, and so are we. We actually went through our strategic work plan beginning of this year as well. The ASCCC had already developed a strategic comprehensive work plan to go from 2018 to 2023. And since that plan had ended, we certainly set about the process of developing a new strategic work plan that would guide our work into the next 5 years. And so throughout the spring semester of 2023, the executive committee of the ASCCC got together and worked through a series of workshops, through a series of meetings, through guidance from some counselors that we brought in, we developed our strategic plan, and we focused primarily on these 4 main directions. Number 1, embracing organizational change. By this, what we mean is reimagining the ASCCC to support our new mission and vision. Now that we've included IDEA, equity, disability, anti-racism, and accessibility into our mission and vision, we now have to go in and reimagine the structures of our organization to fit those new missions and vision. So embracing organizational change, reimagining our ASCCC structures to support the new mission and our new focus on IDEA specifically. Number 2, engaging proactively in partnerships and advocacy to advance faculty voice and student success. This is one that I kind of hinted at before, where I mentioned that when it comes to certainly legislative advocacy, the ASCCC has more traditionally let our sister organization, FACT, handle those particular issues. But in the last several years, we've definitely seen that it is important for us to take a more active role when it comes to advocacy and legislation. So we've made that one of our more specific strategic directions. In that particular vein, we've hired a consultant who is a specific legislative consultant who helps us with communicating and connecting with the assembly people in California. That's Austin Webster, who's great at his job. We also are organizing monthly legislative and advocacy webinars hosted by the ASCCC, where we will focus on legislation coming up that is specifically impacting academic and professional matters. We'll highlight that legislation for our faculty, and we'll definitely work to be more proactive in terms of looking at legislation and getting our faculty to become more involved in that legislation as well. And strategic direction number 4, advancing faculty engagement in data literacy, generating a culture of curiosity in which faculty use data to develop questions to be explored in support of greater student success. And that really does touch upon disaggregated data. And again, we heard Dr. Momjian talk about the importance of that disaggregated data. We talked about it yesterday in our breakout session, how in a lot of ways, if we're really talking about social justice, when we're talking about certainly outcomes, when we're talking about accreditation, when we're talking about curriculum from a social justice lens, we have to talk about disaggregated data. If we're not looking at social justice through a disaggregated data, we're not looking at it through a complete lens. And so certainly advancing our faculty, engaging our faculty in that data literacy, encouraging them to focus on disaggregated data will certainly, I think, help our faculty in that work towards a more equitable or socially just community college system. Similar to Dr. Momjian, we certainly also invite you to take a look at our strategic work plan. Once you do have access to this file, if you click on the link down here, it'll take you to our strategic work plan for 23-24. You can see the process that we went through to develop our strategic directions. You'll see our short-term goals, and you'll see our long-term goals as well. And we certainly do appreciate and encourage any kind of comments or any kind of perspectives. Okay, just a few more things for me before I start to climb it up. I probably have taken much more time than I've had. A couple of things very quickly. The ASCCC continues our advocacy throughout the state. Every month we find ourselves sending our members throughout various community colleges in the state to either participate in conferences or webinars, to do college visits, to focus on panels. So we continue to do that. This year we have been on the road focusing on CTE regionals with the collaboration with the regional consortia. We have had curriculum regionals throughout the fall semester where we visited campuses such as Bakersfield College and talked about curriculum issues specifically. I've already mentioned the Vision 2030 summits that we did together with Chancellor Christian. We've also done Vision 2030 summits with FACT, where we focus specifically on generative AI. And then we've also done college visits where we continue to help our local colleges with things such as shared governance, accreditation, and certainly things such as the Brown Act and cultural humility. So we remain very active. We try to go out throughout the state and we try to support our faculty to give them the information that they need, to give them the support that they need to be effective faculty leaders throughout the state and on their local college campuses. We do have some webinars and some events that are coming up that I'll ask you to look out for. We have our ASCCC monthly legislative webinars. I've already mentioned that we are going to begin doing monthly legislative webinars beginning in late February, and then every month, hopefully on the third Tuesdays of the month. We've not yet finalized that, which is why I have TBA next to that, but please be on the lookout or visit our website, or we will send out an email once those legislative webinars are scheduled. Again, the focus on those webinars will be to give our faculty as much information as they can about any bills that are coming up, certainly any bills that are impacting academic and professional matters, and certainly to receive their input on how we should address those bills. We also have accreditation committee town halls that are coming up throughout the spring semester as well. We are working together in collaboration with the ACCJC, where we will have one town hall in March and one in April. Both of these town halls will give our faculty the opportunity to ask questions in regards to the new 2024 accreditation standards, to get information directly from representatives of the ACCJC, and certainly to gain support as they go through their accreditation process. Again, those dates are being formalized, so be on the lookout for email or visit our ASCCC website for those specific dates. And then we do have a new opportunities and work experience webinar coming up this February the 7th, where we'll talk specifically about work experience, strong workforce, credit for prior learning as well. Other events that are coming up in the month, during the spring semester, we have 2 more CTE regionals coming up, February the 2nd and February the 9th. On February the 24th, we have the first of our spring curriculum regional meetings. We'll be in Santa Ana College. On March the 1st, we'll be in College of the Sequoias. And on March the 2nd, we will be at the Anza College. These are our spring curriculum regional meetings. And again, here we will be discussing things that are relevant to curriculum. And then finally, April 18th to the 20th is our ASCCC spring plenary. Okay, well, I think that is it for my brief summary. I do leave you with some ASCCC resources. So if you are at all interested in any of the things that I discussed, a lot of these links will give you more information there. And certainly if you have any questions at all, you can reach out to us at ASCCC or info@asccc.org. And we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much. This is so much good information. I know it's a lot of information. Some of you might have to revisit the recording and digest it a little bit more, but I really want to encourage those with questions to ask them through the Q&A format. That makes it a little bit easier for us to just make sure we catch all of them so that they don't get lost in the chat. So if you don't mind doing that, and of course, dogs start barking as soon as I start talking. I do see one question in the chat, Manuel, and I see Enrique has his hand up as well. Someone asked, is anyone within ASCCC working to update the Brown Act or working with others to advocate to update the Brown Act to allow for virtual meetings? Do you know if that's happening anywhere?
Well, so the ASCCC specifically is not, but the Student Senate for California Community Colleges has been very active in that area. And so we're supporting the Student Senate in their efforts to make the Brown Act more flexible for virtual meetings. So I guess that would be the best answer. We've not yet, but through our support with the SSCCC, we are certainly supportive of their efforts to change the Brown Act or to make it more flexible.
Thank you. Yeah, so maybe working with your your local students, governments, that might be a really good avenue to go. And then I just wanted to bring attention to a question that came through earlier that I kind of helped answer, but someone had just mentioned when it comes to dual enrollment that there's a lot of training has been done for community college professionals in andragogy, but this maybe is a little more focused on pedagogy because of the age difference. And so their question was about professional development and working with the younger high school population. So the recommendation I threw out there is that sounds like a really good resolution to throw out to ASCCC, maybe for this upcoming spring plenary, but I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that, Manuel.
No, Bethany, actually, that's the perfect answer. I think most definitely. It is something that we have to focus on. I agree that the ASCCC needs to take a very active approach when it comes to dual enrollment. And again, we're driven by our resolution. So if somebody submits a resolution that says, develop a toolkit to help us faculty in terms of working with students who are 15 or younger, right? That is something that we can definitely do and we can work on. So that I would certainly urge you to consider submitting a resolution. I'm happy to work with you on that so we can write it up and get it submitted. But I think other ways that you can kind of get involved and make sure that that's happening is to reach out specifically to the Board of Governors. Go to the Board of Governors website where they do have a link that you as faculty members can specifically give input, and you can ultimately let them know, say, hey, we need more professional development, kick down some resources, right? Give us some money so that we can bring in some people to teach us how to work with these students pedagogically, definitely.
And I think loop in your local academic senates too, because that makes your voice bigger in your institution. So it's not just one person saying we really need this, it's getting your entire faculty body, or maybe you have a district and you can bring in all those faculty in and say, hey, this is a really big need that we have. So
Yeah.
Enrique, I know you had a question earlier. Did you want to?
Yes, Manuel, thank you. So in discussing the student learning assessment, or at the broader assessment of student learning, the issue of academic freedom frequently emerges. Why is there a need to reconcile academic freedom with SLO assessment? Additionally, why is the SLO assessment often perceived as an encroachment of academic freedom, particularly regarding faculty activities in the classroom?
So that's a whole breakout session on its own, right? So I'm going to stop sharing as well so I can see it.
Because this is a very critical thing that, in the academic setting.
Oh yeah, definitely, right? So I definitely understand the question itself. So I think the answer is that when we look at SLOs, SLOs aren't meant to specifically dictate what you're teaching in the course, right? That's actually your course outline of record, right? Your course outline of record is what says what it is that you can or cannot teach in the course. And I think that's something that I always emphasize as well. When we talk about academic freedom, right? Academic freedom doesn't mean I could teach whatever I want in the class, right? You're still, in essence, framed by the course outline of records. I always use the example, if I'm an astronomy professor, I can't just teach, whether or not Capricorn goes well with Pisces, or, what happens when the moon is in Scorpio. There is a very specific course outline of record that tells me what it is that I need to teach. So the first thing is to keep that in mind, right? Academic freedom doesn't mean I'm going to teach whatever I want. It means I'm going to teach what's on the course outline of record in the way that I want, right? And that's where the academic freedom comes in. The student learning objectives are different from the course outline of record, right? The student learning objectives are more concepts that we want to infuse throughout our course. You might even say, let's say, holistically, right? So that by the end of the semester, students will have a better understanding, let's say, of global impact, right? Or of critical thinking. Those are more in line with what we call student learning outcomes than, let's say, a student will know about the Mexican-American War and what happened with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, right? That is more specifically to a course outline of record. So student learning objectives, while they tell our faculty, here are concepts that we want our students to walk away from by the end of the course, don't tell our faculty what to teach. For me, that's an interesting thing, because it's similar to, I think, the conversations about, say, social justice, right? Or equity that we're having, where some of our faculty are saying, well, I don't want to teach equity in my classes. Or you've heard the argument, what is why do I need to teach equity or diversity in a chemistry course? Well, when we're talking about things such as equity and diversity, we're not talking again about the subject matter, we're talking about concepts, right? These are things that we want our students to walk away from at the end of the course, but that's not what you're teaching specifically. And so the same thing applies, right? Student learning objectives don't infringe on what you're teaching. The course outline of records does, right? Student learning objectives ultimately just say, please make sure that by the time your students are done, they are global leaders. They're stewards of the environment. They're critical thinkers, right? And those are things that you can apply to any course, to any discipline.
But at the end, we need to make sure that learning is taking place, right? Ensuring that learning is taking place. That is the key, right?
That's absolutely the key.
So just a follow-up question. I know that we're using AI, right? And first question: is the academic center working on a guide for colleges, as far as a template or a guide or a program guide for
Yes.
Particularly for faculty training, integration of AI, things like that in that nature?
Yes, I believe a resolution was passed directing the academic senate to address AI. There were actually a couple of resolutions. One of them was to develop a toolkit. So that, I believe, is in the process. The other one, though, was to look at the impact of AI in regards to how students feel about AI. So I know that there was a resolution that was passed, I want to say it was maybe 3 years ago at this point, that asked the ASCCC to look at AI in relation to private companies and AI in relation to surveillance. So it kind of points to how there's such a disparate perspective in terms of AI from our faculty. But definitely we will see, I think, an AI toolkit come out within about a year or so. And hopefully we will see the other one addressed as well about the concerns about AI.
What do you see the benefits or the or challenges of those, foreseen integrations?
What do I see specifically?
Yes. Or if you can speak on behalf of the academic, statewide academic senate.
Well, see, that's the thing, right? So the statewide academic senate has not taken a position on AI yet. So I'll start off by saying that.
Okay.
And again, that might be something that by resolution you might ask the statewide to take a position on AI. So if I say anything right now on AI, it's me. It's not the academic senate's perspective. And my perspective, particularly on AI, is that we need to be very careful with AI. I believe very strongly in something called algorithmic injustice, which is a concept where technology is not inherently infallible, and in fact relies on data and empirical evidence that is already skewed and that is already biased. And thus, when we used algorithms in our technology, certainly within AI, what we may be doing inadvertently is reinforcing those same structures or those same biases that already existed before. So personally, I believe that we need to go forward with AI very, very carefully. We need to be very trepidatious, and we need to be very, very critical in how we look at AI. I know that doesn't sound positive. I really am a proponent of AI, but I'm a proponent of it in the sense that we need to be very careful in terms of how we go into it. I should mention this. Chancellor Christian, in her very first meeting when we met with the Board of Governors, was so excited about AI. She seemed to want to just like jump out of her seat in terms of her excitement of it. And I mentioned at that first meeting, well, we need to really talk about the racism in AI. And I'm glad that since then, she has definitely, I think, become much more aware of that and has now more recently taken on a more, let's say, apprehensive approach, where she's no longer saying, yay, generative AI, but let's be careful, let's walk slowly, let's make sure we're doing this correctly.
Thank you, Manuel. I think it is, once again, it's my personal opinion that, we're here, but then AI is 5 years ahead of us already. And we're in the, currently, but AI has gone this way already. And so.
Oh, yeah. So even my warning is already too late, right? Even our warning to be careful is already too late.
I think your warning is something that's been screamed for a few years. So yeah, that's okay. I don't, it's something we still need to hear, even if it's, yeah. Liza, I do see you, but while we're on the topic of kind of social justice and the role that plays, Manuel, earlier you talked about how social justice fits into the accreditation process. Would you mind expanding on that a bit, and specifically if there's any overlap with student learning outcomes?
Well, the more specific one would be with the ACCJC's new social justice standards, right? And so I guess Dr. Momjian probably would have been the better one to respond to that question. What I will say is that the social justice standards within the ACCJC are really in line with their move towards a more holistic approach. And again, I think Dr. Momjian mentioned that as well. So the social justice standards aren't a checkbox that you have to check as you're going through your accreditation process, right? To say, did you have X number of diversity meetings, X or something like that? But instead, they're concepts that are kind of embedded within the standards themselves. And so the idea behind the social justice standards isn't that you've got this kind of rigid check mark, but more, how are you using a social justice lens when looking at all of the other standards themselves? So for me, it goes back to that kind of holistic approach, right? Looking at the standards, when we look at them through this social justice lens, how does that shift our narrative?
Thank you. Thank you. Liza, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Manuel, fellow colleague at Mesa. Nice to see you. So my question kind of has two parts. I'm going to shift it a little bit back to outcomes, and I'm just wondering, what are the future directions or innovations in SLO assessment that the Academic Senate is exploring or advocating for? And then from that, I wonder if you could share some examples of best practices or success stories in SLO assessment from various colleges within the state system.
Wow, that's a big one. Unfortunately,
Sorry.
I don't give you great examples right now, but off the top of my head.
Sure.
What the ASCCC is doing, participating in the SLO Symposium is one way. Working with the accreditation, with the ACCJC is another way as well, and supporting our local senates. We don't have anything on the statewide work, so we don't have, let's say, a SLO subcommittee or a standing committee. So most of what we do in terms of SLO work happens through the accreditation process, but usually it happens in that way itself. So I think the first answer is there's nothing concrete that the ASCCC is doing in terms of SLO, innovative SLO processes, other than participating in symposiums such as this one. So in terms of best practices, again, I don't have any off the top of my head that I you. I will tell you that at yesterday's presentation, during our breakout session, we did talk about using generative AI to help us in our SLO process. And that was definitely an interesting exercise for me. Not as the ASCCC Vice President, but just as Manuel Vélez, interesting, committee member, I did find it interesting to use AI to begin the conversation about your SLOs. If you use, say, ChatGPT and plug in your SLOs through your ChatGPT, begin the conversation from there and see how you can take what ChatGPT gave you and make your SLOs more equity infused. But again, that's me personally, that's not the ASCCC. I totally feel like I failed Liza on that example. So.
No, not at all. Yeah, it was a tough one, you're right. Sorry to put you on the spot.
And just a reminder, if there's any questions or anything you want to follow up with Manuel on, if you could put it in our Q&A just so we don't lose it somewhere in the chat. So just a kind of an adjacent question to that. Does the Academic Senate have any recommendations for integrating SLO assessment into the curriculum design and review process? Because curriculum and design fall under the 10+1.
No, we don't. See, I'm taking notes here. I'm gonna have to start taking bring them back.
You didn't know you'd get homework today, huh?
No, exactly. No, and these are definitely great questions. So I will definitely go back to the ASCCC and talk to them about these ideas. But yeah, so the answer again, unfortunately, is no.
That's okay. It comes back to what we were talking about earlier of, if it's maybe not there now, what a great opportunity for someone to write a resolution, join a committee, and get some of these things off the ground. And so I think one of the final things I just want to ask you is, how do you, or can you just lay out for us, how can faculty really get involved with ASCCC as an organization? How can they maybe join some of these committees, have their voices heard in places like plenary? Could you maybe just walk us through that?
Sure. I think the very first step is to get involved with your local academic senate, because the ASCCC, our work goes through the academic senate. So if you're involved in your local academic senate, then you're already kind of one step into the process of working with the ASCCC. There are several things that you can do from there. Number one, attend our plenary sessions. Usually colleges will save money aside to the academic senates to give them the ability to attend conferences such as the plenary. Try to take advantage of that. Try to come to our plenaries. We, through our foundation, also offer scholarships and grants for faculty to attend our plenaries as well. So if you are interested, visit the Academic Senate Foundation for California Community Colleges website, and they do offer scholarships and grants. Attending our plenaries it's the way that we get most of our faculty involved, because they are exciting. Our faculty get engaged. They are extremely informative. The plenary process itself, where faculty are working with each other, developing resolutions, debating and fighting for those resolutions and voting for them, is a really, really exciting and energetic process. It gets people involved and it makes you want to be a part of the overall process as well. So anything that you can, get to one of the plenaries and be a part of it in that way. Also, and I mentioned this with the standing committees, we have 15 standing committees that do a lot of the work of the Academic Senate. In faculty who participate in those committees certainly become very well informed, become experts in those particular areas, are able to lend their expertise into those areas as well. And I should say, develop really wonderful relationships and build really strong camaraderie. So I would urge all faculty to visit our ASCCC website. We have a link where you can submit a form letting us know that you're interested in doing statewide service and serving on one of our standing committees. You can let us know which standing committee you're interested in. And then every year, we then appoint new members to each of those standing committees. So I would urge you to submit a form, let us know which committee you're interested in, and then keep an eye out during about August when we begin to send emails letting faculty know whether or not they'll be on the committee.
Go ahead, Enrique.
Manu, real quick. You know, if I'm a new faculty, right? I'm a tenure, just started with my tenure. And how would I go about the steps that you mentioned? How would I get involved with my local academic senate, and how do I move up serving other committees and then eventually becoming a member of the statewide academic senate? What are the steps?
Well, the steps, the steps are active, to be active. So here's the interesting, right? To be involved in the academic senate, it used to be, and this may be changing, that you needed to be tenured, right? So a tenured track faculty, the comment used to be, well, get tenure, and then you can become involved in the academic senate. And the reason for that certainly was because tenured faculty have protection. And thus, if you're in the academic senate, you can speak out in support of the faculty. If you have to confront your administration, you could do so, right? But that's changing. I think it's changing for several reasons. I think one, this may or may not be true. Maybe our relationships with our administrations are a little bit better than they were before. Two, our tenure track faculty, I think, are coming in with a lot more training and a lot more knowledge than I think even we did when we were coming in as newer faculty. And so I'm beginning to see more and more academic senates encouraging new faculty, tenure track faculty to come in. So again, get involved in your academic senate. If you are a tenured faculty, see if you can just begin by attending the meetings. If you are a tenure track faculty as well. It depends also on what kind of academic senate you have. There are two main types of academic senates in our colleges. There's the one that's, I call it the representative one, where the academic senate might be 8 to 10 members strong. The entire faculty elects these 8 to 10 members, but they make up the academic senate. There's the more comprehensive one, such as the one that we have at Mesa College, where the academic senate is made up of a representative from every single discipline in the college. So every discipline has a senator who attends the academic senate meetings. Those are big meetings. But that might be definitely a way for a young, I don't want to say young, just say a tenured track professor, right, to get started there is by asking their discipline, can I sit in on the meetings? Can I perhaps be the delegate for this particular meeting to start to gain experience in the academic senate? But sit in on your meetings, go to the meetings themselves, volunteer to be a part of committees, and make sure that you're working on those committees that are more college level committees. Your curriculum committee, your institutional effectiveness committee, your accreditation committee. Those are the committees where you're going to start to gain a lot more understanding of how the college system functions, how leadership works, how shared governance works, all of those things. So those are the committees that you want to look at. And then again, as I mentioned to Bethany, go to the plenaries, apply for statewide work, get involved with our standing committees.
And I'd add to that not a lot of your academic senate meetings, your local ones should be public. So even if you don't go as a voting member, go as just someone who can observe. I think I did that in my early days. I even did that as an adjunct. when I didn't really know what Academic Senate was yet. And it was a really good opportunity for me. And I absolutely use that on my hiring committee when I applied for full-time as experience. So it's something where you can go and kind of figure it out if you're not ready to be an active participant, but also just take that step and be an active participant if you can. I would encourage that as well. So I just want to say thank you so much, Manuel, for being here. I know we hit you with some of the hard questions, and you had us there. You were good, and I really just appreciate your time this morning and bringing some really good information from ASCCC. You got a lot of comments in the chat. Just thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your information.
Well, thank you. I haven't paid attention to the chat, so thank you.
That's okay. You're good. We got you. We got you. But we appreciate your time, and we so appreciate the work that ASCCC is doing, and just to support the faculty voice. And yeah, hopefully we will see you more soon.
Hopefully, definitely. And hopefully I'll see all of you at the spring plenary.
It won't be at spring, maybe something in summer. I have my fingers crossed, but so I just want to say thank you so much again. And I'm actually going to pass it off to Enrique, who is going to introduce our next group of people.
All right. Thank you, Primo.
Thank you. Oh, so I don't know where we might be. Well, before we do that, Bethany, Jarek, do you have any last words?
I think you're stepped away for just a moment, so I think you're good to go. Yeah.
All right, let me start. Susie, can we highlight Lorraine, and it's Mimi and it's Fred in here already?
You need to turn their cameras on. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
morning.
Thank you, Bethany. It is with my great honor to now move forward. I know we're 4 minutes ahead, but we have faculty from and administrators from Fresno City College. Let me introduce first Lorraine Smith, the Dean of Allied Health and Physical Education in Athletics Division, followed by Mimi Myers and Fred Thomas, who are the dental hygiene faculty from Fresno City College. I want to thank you. I want to thank Fred and Mimi. There were also the presenters for the Friday SLO talks. And so thank you for that. And thank you again for coming in today. Just FYI, the dental hygiene at Fresno City College, we just had a new grand idea that we're going to have. We gave a RAM for doing the an assessment, an award assessment, and they received a RAM from Fresno City College, and that RAM is given every semester to those disciplines or programs who are doing wonderful job in the field of assessment. So thank you, Lorraine. With that being said, take it away.
Thank you, Enrique. Let me, as always, figure out how to share my screen here. You think we would have this all figured out? Let's see. Okay, I think we're good. Well, thank you, Enrique, and thank you all of you for being here. I'm really excited as I looked over all of the things that you've been learning and hearing about for the last 2 days. It's really encouraging and invigorating. I know it's Saturday morning, so we'll get going. Enrique asked us to close out this session by talking about just an overview of SLOs and beyond. Where do we go from here? We've learned so much this weekend, and now what do we do with it? I think we have a lot of information. So we're just going to go over a few things. Let's make sure I can advance here. Our panel today, again, I'm Lorraine Smith. I'm a Dean of Instruction. And as Enrique mentioned, we have 2 faculty that will be joining me. It was fun to hear the Academic Senate presentation because all of the things that were talked about, that was me. Why am I here now as a dean? I actually started, I was a business professional before getting into education. And when I became a faculty, I started adjunct faculty, teaching some classes in the business division. And right away, not only did I have a passion for teaching, I saw how we could train people, the value and how rewarding it is to see students really learning and then moving on and getting jobs and meeting their goals and achieving their dreams. So for me, as I'm sure for many of you, teaching really became my passion. I became full-time faculty, and then that's when I started to get involved with Academic Senate, accreditation visits, SLO committee, curriculum committee, and I was one of those people that, again, as the Academic Senate just referred to, getting involved really provides you with that deeper understanding of what's needed to help our students achieve their goals. After all, that's why we're all here, to help our students achieve their goals. When I was SLO coordinator, was really an exciting time. It was a challenging time. It was back when the accreditation was actually trying to measure all of the colleges of, were we actually doing what we were supposed to be doing? No more talking about it, but actually doing the work. Then after that time, again, with all my involvement, I became a dean, started with the interim to go to the administrative side and ended up realizing that I could support SLOs even as a dean, and maybe even more so. I had that ability to give the faculty the time and the space to really have the conversations that needed to be had in order to make SLOs meaningful to them. So I will let Fred and Mimi introduce themselves when they start their presentation. So as I was reviewing your symposium session themes, you've learned a lot, and I'm sorry that I was not able to attend every session, but artificial intelligence, as we know now, we know students are going to use it. It's here to stay. You've talked a lot about inclusion, and you really talked about real student learning. I think it was Dr. Campbell's presentation. She had a lot of data saying, really, how can we measure this? Our presentation is not going to go over a lot of that data. We're going to focus more on what you can do. Again, we saw some sessions were on competency-based education. You know, students have those skills already. How can we measure that? And of course, over all of these, we have the theme of equity. We know our students come from different places, and we know that as we're considering outcomes and student achievement, we need to keep that in mind. So all of these sessions that you've attended, what do we do with this knowledge tomorrow? All of your sessions, you're probably all used to saying, okay, these are the session learning outcomes. The speaker's slide will say, here's what we're going to learn in this next hour. By the end of this session, students will be able to, and I think if you're a faculty, some colleges, I know some curriculum committees say, oh, you need at least 3 SLOs in every course. That's why I have 3 little question marks there. But really, if you think of a student, all of you right now might be looking at your phones and saying, really, blah, blah, blah. This is the outcome. This is the objective. This is terminology that really doesn't make sense to me. I'm not really connecting to it. Just, I just want to listen and figure out what I'm going to learn. So what will you learn today, right now? You might be thinking, should I stay for this session? It's Saturday, maybe. Should I get another cup of coffee? Is this going to be worth my time? What value is this session going to provide? And actually, why am I here? These types of questions are what your students ask probably every day when they enter the classroom. What is this all about? Is this worth it? Why am I listening to this lecture? What value is it going to provide me? Why am I here? So part of what we're hoping you take from this session is looking again in a fresh way. How am I teaching? What does my classroom look like? And what does my courses look like? this slide goes over, and I know you've probably heard a lot of background, but this article in particular was just about 2 weeks ago, or actually just a week ago, last week in the Wall Street Journal. And it dealt with, the question was why Americans have lost faith in the value of college. The article talked about, we've had 3 generations of the idea of college for all. Most families now, however, are looking for alternatives with all that's been in the news with the stepping down of Ivy League presidents and the affirmative action and the cost of college and the loan costs. People are starting to question, what is the value of college? Do we send our students to college? A few key points that I took from that article: in the past decade, the percentage of Americans who expressed a lot of confidence in higher education fell from 57 to 36%. So I know you can do the math, but what struck me is 64% of Americans do not have confidence in college. Wow, that's too high in my mind. The article also mentioned that there is a failure of many schools to teach students to think critically. Now, when we throw AI into that process, and we know that AI can generate the rote answers to essays or papers, how are we going to encourage our students to think critically? And the world is noticing that. This came from surveys of employers saying we're getting these graduates who, yes, they received credentials or degrees, but we can't see the outcomes that they achieved in college, nor can the students themselves, the graduates, see the outcomes. So there's, again, an increase in instances of cheating and not learning. I noticed this really when the pandemic first happened and teaching went to Zoom. Some of our students, and if you've done generational studies of our students, they want to use all the resources available. They don't see it as cheating. They see it as using the resources, the internet, the tools that are available to me to help me answer the questions. So as educators, we really need to think of, we know that's there. How can we get students to actually think more critically by not just having the answers right there? In 2022, there is still 62% of students enrolled in college after high school. That number, that means 38% did not. And expectations are that number will go down unless we as educators do something. Typically, we, in faculty, community colleges, we sit and say the students will come to us. Well, unless we do things differently, the students will stop coming to us. So what does this mean for us with respect to SLOs? So I just wanted to start with, can we imagine a world as we're in college that students wanted to come to us? Imagine that knowledge is used to move our world forward in a positive way. There's so much negativity in our world today. What if our younger generations, our students, felt that if I gain this knowledge, I'm going to gain information that will help us move forward in a positive way? What if learning is applied to solve some of the critical global challenges? And these younger generations approach learning with enthusiasm, recognizing that their knowledge can have a positive impact on society. They're not going to college just to then get a job, although that's a key part of this, but they're coming to college because they know they have an obligation to help their generation. They're blaming a lot of our generation for making a mess, but they know that they can make a difference. What if education is looked at not as a waste of money and hours memorizing this content that will not be used again because I can find it online, but it's an access to concepts that can shape our understanding of our world around us? What if students said, I really want to be there? So how can we as educators and with the tools of SLO assessment actually do this? So I want to ask you all to make yourself a student again. Think about something that you want to learn. I have a few examples here. The first one is, now we know if I say I want to learn a new language, the student learning outcome in a class would be, I want to be able to hold a 1-minute conversation in Spanish with someone. Now, we all know that first I'll have to learn the vocabulary. That's an objective. I need to understand the conjugations. That's an objective. I know that I'll have to practice. I'll have to do outside assignments, both written and oral, and be tested. But if I do all these things, I can reach my goal. Seems pretty simple, right? I'll take another example, and this is an example that's in the Academic Senate handbook, which all of you can refer to and should. It really clarifies, if you're new to SLOs, really the difference between SLOs and objectives. But if I take a class, a swimming class, I will be able to swim the backstroke for at least 10 yards. Wow, that would be really cool. If you're teaching a class and you want to know what the outcomes are, what are the students going to be able to do? How can they relate to that? How can they see this as something, wow, I want to do that? I have one more example here. And these are SLOs that are in a conservation biology class. The things that I highlighted here is students at the end of the class would be able to articulate how human actions directly impact biodiversity in the ecosystems. And they'll be able to apply critical thinking skills to evaluate conservation challenges and solutions. Now, that's a very clear SLOs. So students could see this and say, wait, am I a part of the problem? Are my human actions impacting the world? And then how can I be part of the solution? How can I evaluate challenges and solutions? How can I make something, do something? So these examples really just show that we have the power as educators to motivate our students, get them excited about the learning, because we are actually creating relevant courses and relevant outcomes. So again, learning outcomes, when you create them, and we're asking you what you can do tomorrow, is really looking at clear, measurable, applicable. Can you create enthusiasm and motivate student achievement? And I think we can. And I think those of us who have been advocates of SLOs and student learning assessment for some time really see the difference. We know it's not grades that they get in a class that measure their learning. Again, we can see that. So how can we, again, create those outcomes so that they are meaningful and relevant to students? At this point, I'm going to, very pleased to introduce two faculty members at Fresno City College to give their perspective of back to the basics and what exactly we can do tomorrow. So Fred Thomas, let you introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Fred Thomas. I am a RDH, a registered dental hygienist that teaches in the dental hygiene program on Fresno City campus. We have an excellent program, and I'm just here just to remind everybody that actually to piggyback off Lorraine with, we can just keep this simple. You go right back to the basics. You don't have to reinvent the wheel or anything like that. You go right back to the basics and are looking at your course description. How is that, articulated? Is it student friendly? Is it, put yourself from the student standpoint. So that's where we would start, looking at your SLOs for all your courses you're teaching and reevaluating those. Does it need a little bit of tweaking here? Is it fine? If you were a student, would you understand, what you are supposed to learn and what the outcome is, for a particular course? So that's where you kind of want to start, is looking at your course description, then looking at your objectives. And if I'm going to, all right, you can go to the next one. And as an example, for all, whether you teach, a technical class, a math class, or even, English, we all can identify with the institutional general education SLOs. So what we can all agree upon is that communication, critical thinking, and information competency, community and global awareness and responsibility, personal, academic, and career development. All of these encompasses, all the classes, whether general ed or a technical course. When you are looking at formulating your SLO, you might want to look at the communication piece of it. At the end of what you are trying to teach, will your students be able to demonstrate effective communication and comprehension skills, not only on campus and in other classes, but out in the general public when they get in the workforce? Looking at the critical thinking and information competency piece, are you able to, will your students be able to identify, vital questions and problems and issues and critical think through, an issue that they run into when they get into the workforce, as well as after your class, depending on, whatever you're teaching, whether that may be math or English. And then looking at the community and global awareness piece, can your students, demonstrate the knowledge and the social, cultural environment and the aesthetic perspectives to be able to be viable in the workforce as well as on campus? And then that last piece, the personal and academic and career development, will your students be able to assess their own skills and abilities to develop personal education and make adjustments, or will they be able to do that? So everyone's SLOs can have a little piece of the institutional, and we can all identify with this in one way, shape, or form. The next slide, Lorraine. Again, what I mean by keeping it simple and just looking and assessing the basics, look at all your course SLOs. Are they clear from a student's perspective? You may understand them, other instructors will understand them, but from a student perspective, are they clear to what you want that student the outcome for that to be? And can you make it fun? Can it be exciting? So specifically looking at your course description, then you are going to evaluate your course objectives. Whatever your course objectives are, maybe that needs to be a little bit tweaking. Maybe you're fine with that. And then the outcomes. What kind of results are you expecting? So looking at these three components, you want to look at creative ways to tie them all together and come up with one or two or three, student learning outcomes. Next slide. In a few examples and tying them all together, you can use a classroom activity or assignment. Whether you have an English class, math class, engineering class, or even the technical class, something that in my field, whether that's radiology or dental hygiene. Creative classroom interactive activities that address the course description and objectives and outcomes. They're always great learning opportunities for students. And the more interactive they can be, the better the students will, remember them, especially if they're creative and out the box, and it keeps their interest. Written and group assignments are always another way to be specific to a certain SLO, and they can be practiced over and over during a course. So then you will repeat this same process for your future SLOs. For if you have 3 SLOs, you just repeat this process for the other 2 SLOs. And in order to find how you measure a student's competency, you can implement the exact SLO description within several exams. It doesn't have to be over one exam. It could be over several exams. If you give 3 or 4 exams during a course, your SLO descriptions can be spread out over that over that time period by asking, direct questions or creating a direct skill evaluation concerning the SLO statement. And then at the end of the course, there you have it. You measure, who got that answer right and who needs work on it, and then you can come up with your little measuring tool. So I hope that these reminders kind of stick with you along with everything else that you've heard over the last few days. But there's just little tidbits. We don't have to recreate, something that's it's already there. We just need to tweak it, look at it, and really take that introspective from a student standpoint. And I think that we all can create better SLOs and really put out another good generation. Thank you.
So I think what Fred summarized before we introduce Mimi, just think of the exciting things you'll be able to do after learning that course content. So again, as a faculty member, as an instructor, examine each of your SLOs and ask why this is important. And will students be able to take this to meet the larger goal? So at this point, I'm going to introduce Mimi Myers. I will actually turn it over to Mimi Myers and let her introduce herself. I've been fortunate, Enrique Jauregui mentioned at the beginning that the dental hygiene program at Fresno City College won the SLO RAM. Fred didn't mention it, but both Fred and Mimi have presented at the SLO talks in the past. That's why we were kind of tapped on the shoulder to come today. And their work is really remarkable. They've actually are an example of how they do this regularly. It's part of the culture of how they teach. And I hope you can tell through their enthusiasm that it's really what they do. So I am going to introduce now Mimi Myers.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. Hello, panel and participants. I'm so thrilled to be able to present this morning. And as Lorraine had just described, that Fred and I won the RAM award for our department and the whole allied health in assessments. And that, going back my bio, this has been a process for me because I was out of college, I became a teacher and always had a love for dental hygiene. And long story short, I was hoping that I could marry education and dental hygiene. And I have a passion for teaching and passion for helping others. And as hygienists, that's what we're doing. And we want to be able to impart this passion for caring for others to our students so that we have not only clinical competent practitioners and clinicians, but we have caring ones as well, because we want to send our family to a caring hygienist. And that's what we try to foster with our students. Okay, let's go ahead. Moving forward, where do we go from here? We can go to the next slide.
I'm trying, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So I'll get you there, Mimi. There you go.
Thank you. So as Lorraine and Fred have been talking about thinking like a student, we always want to be inclusive. And when we're molding our SLOs and our objectives, we want to be able to make sure that we are generating excitement and motivation and inclusion. When the student takes out that syllabus and for the first day and takes a look at the class, it's all on paper and it can be scary and daunting for them. But if we can formulate our SLOs to be thinking like a student and exciting for that student to be just on paper, wow, how exciting is this going to be that I'm going to be learning this, and then transforming over the course of the semester as they are learning and applying all this didactic and clinical, because in dental hygiene, they learn it didactically and then they go perform it. In sim labs, or also, of course, on regular patients in the clinic. So we want to structure our SLOs and our objectives to be removing barriers for learning. Let's take the fear out of them and let's make them motivational, that they know that they're going to be able to do this. Another big thing to talk about, not only from the students' point of view, but as a faculty, I'm a brand new full-time faculty member. I have been adjunct for many years in dental hygiene and truly loved it. And this opportunity came up and I applied. And so here I am as full-time. And one thing that I have appreciated from adjunct, and even more so now as full-time, is the mentorship. The mentorship from my department has been amazing. And I truly feel so blessed that I have great mentors and we work as a team. And this is really so important for a program and a department. Interprofessional collaboration helps to create an atmosphere of faculty inclusiveness and cohesiveness. So including faculty, whether they be a new faculty or an adjunct faculty, it helps build faculty confidence. And so as an adjunct faculty, as I was mentored, I felt that my confidence was bolstered, and I felt that I was participating to standardize. We are all marching to the same beat in this effort to educate our students. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So teamwork is really important because one person as an SLO coordinator can't do it all. Taking responsibility for each class is really important because, as Fred was talking about, do we really need to reinvent the wheel if something is working well? Maybe not reinvent, but one thing that our hygiene program is going through is we are becoming a baccalaureate program, and many years and many people have worked toward the end result. So in fall of 2024, we are starting our baccalaureate dental hygiene program. And up until this point, we have been holding interprofessional collaboration with faculty in our program to have program review and monthly meetings so that we can all benefit to reinfuse our objectives and our SLOs to reflect a baccalaureate program and to make sure that they are student-centered. So, we held the faculty meetings. We went through one class at a time, and we all evaluated the SLOs and the objectives. And if there were any muddy waters, if there were any experiences that a faculty had not having a desired effect, then we worked with the Bloom's taxonomy of the newest and revised verbs, and we rebuilt our objectives to make sure that we were student-centered, and we made sure that we clarified the expectations. And so we were hoping that we're going to have good results with these revised or tweaked SLOs and objectives. Another thing, no matter if you're in dental hygiene or if you're in communication or math or physical education, we can collaborate with other cross-campus departments or other colleges. Governing boards are for dental hygiene, ours are the CODA, to help foster any ideas. If you feel like something is stagnant, you can explore interprofessionally to find out what are other people doing and would this benefit us. So again, we're not reinventing the wheel, but we're sharing ideas. So moving forward, perhaps that's something that you can think that maybe you can add and consider. And then mentorship through the adjunct faculty is really important to help scaffold concepts. And we're working toward becoming calibrated, not only as we want our faculty to be calibrated within the dental hygiene when we're on the floor and a student is, can we use this student for a particular competency? And we have several instructors come to calibrate and make sure we're all making the same decision so that student is confident that their instructors are there for them and we all are on the same page. So that is very important. But when we're scaffolding concepts, keep in mind that we are using different types of methods to, over time, we're going to be seeing the development of students. And as we are developing our SLOs and the objectives, we also want to tie that in scaffolded with the institutional SLOs. Fred was talking about communication and critical thinking and dental hygiene. We need our students to be critically thinking, not just memorizing, but that critical thinking component and community and global awareness of how are they going to fit into the community once they graduate. Yes, we want them to find a job and become a productive member of society. And the institutional SLOs, when we are factoring all that into when we're writing our SLOs and objectives, then that's an important aspect as well. One thing that we always found challenging in dental hygiene is finding instructors within the program. And when we are adopting a new hire, an adjunct faculty or a new faculty member, and we are helping to enable and ensure our next generation of faculty, that the faculty is growing within our department. And not only are they growing, but they're also growing in a calibrated, focused way. So they have the same vision because we're working together. Okay. And so strong and creative SLOs result in robust student motivation and achievement that demonstrates competency. And what's really important is to see from the beginning of the semester toward the end of the semester, the progressively that the student is learning over time. And in the picture here, this student is administering a shot, a local anesthesia to the chrome dome here, to the new chrome dome is actually not all chrome anymore. It's got a lot of plastic and rubber. And so this is building confidence. And there's a lot of critical thinking. So from the very beginning of the semester of just learning about what local anesthetic is, components, armamentarium, and how to deliver this 18-step atraumatic shot. They're really trying to not hurt people. This is like, do no harm is our goal. So this picture is the next step to actually, before the student goes into the clinic, to just deliver local anesthetic on a live patient. And so the competencies progressively developing over time is a wonderful thing that we are, Mr. Thomas has set up in clinic all the competencies. So they have to, it's step-by-step little blocks that they move forward. Ultimately, we want to show that students have mastery of a particular skill or clinical competency, and as well as a didactic component and comprehension at a level where they can compose, create, design, and perform a desired skill with confidence. We are trying to engender confidence in every single student so that they build trust with their patient. And when they're confident, their patient is going to be confident in them and their ability to deliver a quality treatment. So whether it's an English class and they're learning how to conjugate verbs and things of that nature, all of that is working toward this end to reinvigorate our SLOs, embracing our passion for teaching through thinking as a student so that we can engender a passion for learning for the student as well. Thank you very much. And Lorraine, I think.
Thank you, Mimi and Fred. So again, the question we started this session with, what can you do tomorrow? You've heard it. We really discussed amongst ourselves, what is the theme, and kept going back to be a student again. You know, we're not this generation, but how would we like to learn? How can we learn? How can we be excited about learning? Look at the big picture. Again, we know that all of these other tools will be available to students, but the big picture, why there's been a lack of confidence in our education, because we're not looking at the big picture of what Fred shared was the Fresno City College's institutional student learning outcomes, but I would imagine that a lot of your colleges have the same things. Start all over again. Look at each of your courses. As Mimi mentioned, when they were moving towards a baccalaureate degree, they were forced to look at all their courses. But you as faculty, look again tomorrow and read it and look from a student perspective. Does this make sense to me? Is it important? Is it exciting? Is it relatable? Tie in all the elements that Fred talked about, you know, looking at your course description. You all do this through program review and curriculum review, but again, use a different lens, maybe from all of the information that you learned this weekend, use that lens. And engage all faculty. We have faculty turnover. It seems like it's not much, but we're continuously hiring new adjunct faculty, new full-time faculty. Remember that when they come in, they are probably not anywhere near your level of knowledge or understanding of what SLOs and outcomes and assessments can be. In our community college system, we hire in career technical education on related experience. On other disciplines, we hire on masters and doctorates. We don't hire on teaching. And some of your colleges might do a great job on professional development with respect to student learning outcomes, but the newer faculty won't necessarily be at that same level. I'm guessing because you're here at the SLO Symposium that maybe you're at the level where you are a strong advocate for SLOs, but remember that your colleagues might not all be there yet, and how can we bring them all along? So start engaging, adopt an adjunct, start spreading that news that SLO assessments are important. And again, don't recreate the wheel. All of you that are here, and I looked over the list of speakers and presenters, look at those colleges. If you're teaching a course in Psychology 1, go to Miramar or some of these colleges that have presented and look at theirs, because we know that those here in the symposium are those who are passionate and advocates and have probably done a good job in looking at them. So collaborate with not only amongst those colleagues within your own college, but with other colleges that have maybe similar programs. So the question now, what did you learn? Recognize that, you know, your role, our role as educators is that we can make a difference. We can help students view the value of college. Students and all those losing faith in the value of education, if they know and recognize that they can achieve goals, you know, we can make it happen. I saw a question about in the chat about the cost of education, and yes, we at community colleges are so much more affordable than those 4 years, but we also have seen decreases in our enrollment. And again, it's not about the numbers, it's about creating those students who have those tools to make a difference in the world. And all of you here as educators, you're the ones that are going to make it happen. So at this point, we wanted to open it up for any questions that you might have. I'm not sure if you're using the chat for that or if we just want to unmute and ask these questions. Enrique, I'll leave it up to you.
Thank you so much, Lorraine and Mimi and Fred, for this wonderful presentations. We're going to have some questions. We started strong from the beginning, and now we're ending strong. And for me, is what can I take this and what can I do starting Monday, right? Monday. And Lorraine, you made it a wonderful statement. Let's be students again, right? And put ourselves in their shoes. With that being said, I know that the nursing program, the dental hygiene program, the successful criteria, they set it really high because it needs to be high. You track students' progressions, learning progression throughout the semester with summative assessments formative assessments. And so can that carry over to other disciplines? And if yes or no, and why don't we have the same expectation for other disciplines like English, philosophy, communication? Yeah.
Well, I think, Enrique, it's not that we don't have the expectations. I know that I think we do have those expectations. I think for some it might be harder to see. And that's where I think we need to get back to the example of biology or English. There are the professionals here within those disciplines actually know what they expect from students, what they want from students. Many of them were probably, someone teaching English was an English major and has a master's in English. So the content is not they know the content, but linking what they know about that content to really the outcome, what I want students to know from this and how it applies to them, making it relevant. I think, again, I started off my career at Fresno City College as an instructor. And what I found initially is I would teach a course at the basic level the first time. And each semester I would add more content because I was comfortable with the content. So I thought that I could add more content so that to give students more. However, we forget where they're coming from, that they don't necessarily need more. They might need more direction and clarity into what your goal really is. So accreditation standards, back, Fred mentioned those institutional or general education outcomes. How does what you're asking in an English paper, again, students might use AI, we know we don't want them to, but that's there. When students, no matter what their major is, go out to the professional world or want to get involved in politics, or their community, nonprofits, whatever their job might be, let's face it, they're not going to be asked to give APA references in their job. Where, they're not going to be asked to do those skills that we grade and we think are important in an English class. They are very important, but is that the outcome, that we want them to be able to cite resources? Or do we want them to be able to use resources, interpret them, and understand them and apply them in their own way? And those are the things we have to focus on and think about. What do we want students to really be able to do with this? We don't want them to be able to list or again, write a paper on this. We want them to be able to really critically think about these issues and solve those issues. I hope that answered your question.
I know that Mimi, you mentioned, Fred, I'm sorry, make it easy on you. Don't make it hard on you for Monday. As a dental hygiene program, I know you get your accreditation standards, right? And so you have your objectives from your external accreditation body. And on top of that, you have to do the program review for Fresno City College. How do you combine the SLOs with your external accreditation body standards?
I would say that that's the creativeness that comes out with the collaboration of all faculty, full-time and adjunct. So we start with those three pieces with what the institution goals are, what our accreditation body is, and we're looking at all three of those, maybe on three different screens. And we start with just the instructor of record, and then we bring it to a general meeting with just the full-time faculty. And then we bring it to, then after it's kind of, all the ideas are kind of brainstormed in there, and we got a somewhat clear statement. Then we bring it to the adjunct and even, some of the ones on the outside that support the program, general dentist or what have you. So everybody takes a part into forming an excellent SLO. It's not just one person, it's a full collaboration. So what Mimi was talking about, that's why it's really important to not just, that you're doing it by yourself, but it starts with what the pieces that's already there. It really starts with the pieces that's already there. You're just trying to summarize, all the components that's there and come up with something, creative from a student perspective, but that still encompasses your goal. And out of that, things just becomes, and then once it goes into play and it's actually implemented, students are great at giving you feedback at the end of the semester. I've had some SLOs or some competencies that that came out, and I think they're great. Faculty worked really hard on them. And then at the end of the semester, I'll ask feedback from the students, and I'll get a couple here or there. This is what I wish that that could be added, or if it if it encompasses that, and then it's tweaked a little again, and it just turns out to be amazing. But it's a full collaboration, including students, to come up with these SLOs and come up with something that's that is I wouldn't say that's near perfect, but that adds that excitement and everything. Hopefully that answered your question.
No, it did, and it's like you said, you inculcate part-time faculty along with the full-time faculty, so they don't feel left out, right? And so thank you for that. Lisa, Bethany, or Jarek? Bethany.
Liza had a hand up first. She go first.
Okay. I had a question about, rubrics and clear criteria. So in what ways can we develop and implement clear, detailed rubrics that effectively communicate the learning objectives and success criteria to students at the start of a course or assignment?
Very clear rubrics for every single assignment and assessment tool is what we strive to develop. For example, in one of my classes, every assignment they have an attached rubric right in Canvas. So the students, they'll read the instructions that we're going to be giving on paper, as well as it's the same thing as they can find it in Canvas. So whether they are more techno, then they just go right into Canvas, or whether they look right at the paper and the written instruction, there is a rubric attached. So there should not be any questions as far as every little thing that they do, how many points it's worth, and if they want to get full points, what are the expectations? And if they don't meet full points, where did they lose those points? And in Canvas, when we develop that rubric, there's those little comment boxes. If they did not get the full points, I always explain what happened. What was I looking for and I didn't see? So, if it was worth 10 points and they only got 7, how did they lose those points? So, it's really important to have that clear rubric, and the Canvas makes it so interactive. And it's right there. There should be never a question in a student, why did I get this grade? They see that rubric And it is so clear to them, and then we can also give them notes. What can they do next time? You know, how can we schedule some mentor meetings and office hour meetings, and what can they do differently with their study skills? So we can, you know, we're just not just grading, but we really want to see them succeed. So what can we do differently next time to bring them up, to help them to succeed? And that active rubric and those comments and every assignment having a clear competency attached is super effective.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and add too a little bit about rubrics. Is there, remember, there's a difference between the grade and achieving SLOs, and that's been a debate since the very beginning. Well, if they earn an A in the class, that means they met the SLOs, not necessarily. And so when remember that rubrics can be a tool for grading as well as assessing student learning, but not all of the categories of your rubric are really going to apply to that learning. For example, if you're grading an online class, discussion board. First post has to be by Wednesday at 5 p.m. It's worth 5 points. Your spelling and grammar, 5 points. Remember, for some of those things where we're grading on different expectations and skills and really behaviors that we want to see, that they're proofreading, that they're posting on time. We're not really assessing for the learning, but quite a few of those components or criteria could be learning. So the analytics for a specific grading rubric criteria for a class as a whole, rather than the individual learners, is something that I believe I know personally within many of our programs, we're just starting to link those. You know, again, you might have 5 criteria in a rubric, but only the first 2 are really assessing the learning that you want to happen there. Or, you know, all of the others are, do they understand meeting that objective? But again, there's a difference to that. And I think Fred wanted to add one other comment.
The only comment that I wanted to add, both of you had said it. Here I am with that simple, keep it with the basics. What your description is in the assignment, whatever that may be, match that with your rubric and just close those gaps. Because that's what I found is helpful. Whatever I'm asking the student, you know, whatever the assignment is and the description of whether that's writing a paper and it's 12 font, calibri, you know, all this. I just match my rubric with that step for step. That's the easiest way to kind of start with it, regardless of whether your SLOs are part of that. Look at your assignment description of what what the outcome that you want to come out of that, and match your rubric with that step for step. Come up with creative, you know, questions or measurable tools to grade that. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Bethany, have your hand up?
Sorry, I have one follow-up question, Enrique.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So it sounds like, you know, in your rubrics, you're also aligning the outcomes for a portion of it, if I understood that correctly. So that's, you know, one way that we can ensure, you know, our assessments are directly aligned with the outcomes. I'm wondering if you have any other tips, suggestions, strategies for how we can ensure that our assessments are directly aligned with the learning outcomes of that course.
One thing that comes to mind right away is when we're working on the SLOs, when we're formulating our exams, each exam question should be kind of focused toward what SLO is that going to be related to. And if they successfully answered this test question number 42, which addresses SLO number 1, then, you know, then we're linking the SLO through assessments, and we can track it because we know that each question was linked to a specific, you know, overall SLO.
Mimi is actually absolutely right. When we built our courses or reevaluated them, we built them around the SLOs. We built our test questions. The course was built around, you know, the SLO questions. That's the best way to do it in the simplest form.
Thank you. And I think Jarek put a guide to the student learning assessment, so please do so. Bethany.
Yeah, if I could actually just add to that before I move on, is having a shared rubric, maybe as faculty who are grading that, is really helpful too. I come from math, and we find that some of us are more harsher graders or more lenient graders, and I think having a shared understanding so that that SLO data is really useful. It also gives you that opportunity to talk to each other as colleagues about exactly what you're looking for. So it's good conversation. I do just want to point out there's a couple questions in the chat, and I think one is very specific to dental hygiene. So Angela, what I'm going to encourage you to do is to reach out to our speakers, because I think that you mentioned your new faculty. It might be really good to connect with them more one-on-one than in this formatting, to see how they assess some of their SLOs, because it's so discipline specific. But one question I wanted to ask that kind of follows up with what you all were talking about is, how do you really encourage students to reflect on those results that they get, right? So, you know, in their learning process and as they go through maybe results they get with a rubric, how do you encourage that reflection piece?
I'm just gonna say one thing.
Go for it.
It's part of the SLO. I mean, it's part of the rubric. And many of our rubrics, at the very end, it's a reflection and feedback portion that the student has to kind of critical think, what would I have done better? And many of our rubrics, maybe he'll tell you, many of our rubrics, has that piece in it. So put it in the rubric.
A self-reflection is really good.
I think it's after every test, I would ask students, the next assignment or just or a journal you can do in Canvas is it's a graded assignment. Reflect on how you did. What would you do differently? Did you study enough? And that self-reflection by students is really critical. As Fred mentioned earlier, they'll tell you. You can just ask them, these are the SLOs for the course. Do you feel like you achieved them? The end of a final, and you'll get things like, well, I really felt like I achieved 1 and 2, but I don't really feel comfortable, like I really am comfortable with number 3. So those kinds of assignments built in that encourage student self-reflection are really insightful. I think if you have to, you know, make it part of every assessment that they need to reflect. Some of the students I know would say like, oh, I don't even know what my score was. You know, they didn't even look at it sometimes. And you'll find that out if you say, tell me exactly your grade, and are you happy with it? Why or why not? You know, are you going to do anything differently? And then also, do you feel like you need any help from me?
Yeah, I think that's a really great idea. I've used exam wrappers in the past, which you can fully adjust how you want to ask those questions, but it's exactly what you're saying, where at the end it's, well, how did you do? And I also try to connect them to, well, how did you study? Because somebody mentioned earlier, right, we know our disciplines really well, but we don't always like know the teaching part of it as well. And so sometimes our students come in the same place, like they don't always know how to take notes or how to study, and I think it's trying to connect those dots of well, you know, maybe like just reading your notes and not doing anything else, maybe that wasn't the best study method for you. So if it didn't work, let's help you find something else that could work a little bit better. But I think that's great, and I think making it automated in every single rubric so that immediately there's a reflection and they're not waiting almost for you to prompt them later on. It's like you're training them to think about, well, did that work or did that not work? And how could I do that differently or better, or whatever that means for them.
Yeah. And I think it's just, as you said, Bethany, engaging them in the process.
Yeah.
You know, engaging them, making them, instead of sitting here going back. And again, relevant and prompt feedback is really important.
Because I'm still unmuted, there's a great question in the chat about integrating anti-racism into your learning outcomes. Do any of you have thoughts about how to incorporate this, or even if we should be incorporating anti-racism? I mean, I suspect I know your answers, but what role does that play in your outcomes?
I think that through my syllabus, I really try to make sure that everything is fair. Everything is based on a competency, and when they're reading that syllabus, they should understand that this is fair for everybody. And that there's an open door, and if they need help, that there is an absolute open door. I've reached out in so many different levels where they can come and just talk. But I really feel like really making sure that they know that there's an open door and that there's help for whatever the case may be. Because like Lorraine is saying, everybody is coming from so many different types of situations that the syllabus, and then when we get into the classroom with the students and let them know that we are there to support them for their learning, and for them to become, in our case, graduate and pass their board exams and go forth and be an active community member. It starts with fairness and within the classroom, and that open door, and letting them know that we have their back. We're there for their learning. And
I'll just add some of my thoughts just off the cuff, is that there's a different, and I keep going back to this, there's a difference between, our grades and what students learn. And when we have some of these high stake assessments, like a final exam, that might not be, that some students might be challenged with, that, we need to be able to measure achievement of, we need to focus on, that's what the end goal should be. It shouldn't be passing the final exam and passing all of these tests. If students had struggled with attendance, or, our students come with so many barriers that are in their way, how can we design our assessments that are not so high stakes, but that they're built throughout the class, and they're not all just multiple choice or tests or a paper, but there's value to in-class discussions, instead of just lectures, can we have discussions? And how, we used to talk a lot about and focus on different learning styles, visual, audio things, but we need to go beyond that to say different assessment types and modes that different students from all different backgrounds can add value, because they come with a lot of value, maybe from personal experience. I know this symposium had some competency-based education modules or sessions too, that we know students come from all different ways. So again, trying not to focus on a high stakes final exam that's multiple choice, or a paper that might not work, might really not gauge appropriately that certain students met those outcomes. I hope that kind of gives some perspective.
Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you. Mimi.
well, I was just going to say that definitely having a multiple level of different types of interactive learning experiences, and engaging all the different learning styles. I think that back in the day when we were talking about first learning styles, we would just say, oh, you're audio or you're kinesthetic. But actually, I think it's like everybody's a little bit of everything, and favorizing maybe, their strength. But in my class, because I'm aware that everybody learns differently, I really do have set up multiple ways that students can excel and learn. So.
Thank you. Lisa, you have your hand raised.
So Mimi, that's actually my next question. I was going to ask if you could, speak about that more. And I mean, in the last presentation, we, heard about the concept of, universal design for learning. And, I have these conversations with colleagues in STEM who, have some challenges with this, but, how can we use these, variety of assessment methods like projects, presentations, portfolios, practical tasks, or others that you have to cater to these different learning abilities, allowing students to demonstrate their learning in different ways. So you started to mention that you do that in your classroom, and I'd just love to hear more about that.
Okay, so I'll give two different examples. One is in periodontology, and there's 5 different discussions on topics that when we have a dental specialist, periodontist, that will come in, and he's always quizzing the students on these very difficult concepts. So when the students engage in a discussion with each other, first they have a writing prompt that I give them, and they have to answer the writing prompt very succinctly. And then they have to respond to each other and explain to each other these difficult concepts. So they're not just reading about it, which they have the readings naturally. They have assignments. So they do have written assignments. They have the discussions. And in many cases, they have not just writing, but they're drawing. So in a class that I have now, they're actually going to be drawing different types of structures. So for those kinesthetic learners, they have projects where they actually have to draw structures and label and things like that, of that nature. So they're not just being, they have summative exams as well, but then they have some technology. So they can do PowerPoint presentations on a clinical case. So they, in a different class, they have, so in my class, they have the actual component where they're writing and presenting, but they're doing the work in Fred's class. So they're actually working on a patient in the clinic. And there's all kinds of other requirements that, and in fact, there's another requirement that they are using this patient for nutritional aspects. So they're interviewing the patient, they're pulling in information, they're putting it into a website program, they're getting out results, and then they have to synthesize and critically think, what is deficient in this patient's diet? How is that going to affect their oral cavity, and what recommendations can they make for that patient to take these all this didactic information and help the patient understand how that affects them, and where do they go in moving forward? What can they do about it? So there's that aspect where they're actually, it's back and forth utilizing concepts. Another one is, for this particular case, from the very beginning to the very end, they're seeing a patient that has a lot of disease, and that whole journey of how they help bring that patient to a state of health, the pictures that they're taking and the whole interactions and the self-assessment. They are taking radiographs and intraoral pictures, and they take snips. So at the culminating or portfolio type of activity at the end of the semester, they're putting that in a PowerPoint. So they're generating a PowerPoint, and they're sharing from the very beginning to the end where they started with the patient to the end. And they are showing their interactive pictures, so before and after. And so then what was hard? They critically think, what were the difficulties, and moving forward, what would they do differently to get a different response, or how they would apply this particular skill in a different way to get a different result. So there's a lot of, toward the end of the semester, there's a lot of critical thinking going on, but there's so many ways that they're using multiple avenues for learning instead of just taking a test. So they have papers that they write as well. They have to do research papers, and we have a mandatory requirement that they have to see in our health science building. We have a librarian named Ma Yang, and she's amazing. And so she's like just a great resource. So they actually have to, I have them dig in to the rubric of how they're going to organize that paper, get in there, try to think about each of, like there's 8 pages that they have to have. And so they're going to take a stab at those 8 pages. And before they see they have to figure out where they need help. It's like, don't just go to and say, oh, 100%. There's like a big thought bubble. They don't even know where to start. And she can help them as well if that's the case. But I do encourage them to find out where they need help. So when they do make an appointment with her, that it's a real productive appointment. They know where they're going to need help. And then one student came back to me and they were like so excited that how helpful was she, and they knew exactly what they needed help on, and she just delivered. So now they felt empowered. So a lot of the classes have multiple levels of activities beside just a test. So
I would say most of our courses have, 3 components where there's a lecture component, exam, student does a written composition paper of some sort, and then either there's a PowerPoint and some type of presentation, whether that be by the student alone by themselves to test that competency, or in a group form. So I can't really think any of our courses, our didactic courses, that don't encompass that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Jarek, you want to have the last question, or do you have any?
No, I think if I were to just, I'm just listening at all. This is something, we just heard from Academic Senate and accrediting body, and I tell you, you're just doing fantastic work that I think those bodies should recognize, as far as I'm concerned. So this is something that I clearly see there is a lot of work that's cut out for us, and I'm just so very happy that you're the beacons of all those efforts. This is just fascinating to listen to, and just so very happy that there is such strong support. Lorraine, again, I would like to emphasize your empathy for students. I think that's just something that's really of utmost importance here, that this is not about accountability. This is not about us driving the system and for students to comply. It's for us to address the student need and making sure that our students learn what we want them to learn for the benefit of their own life and future. So thank you very much. This is so inspiring. I'm just really grateful for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Yes, I can agree with you, Jarek, and this is why the dental hygiene received the Golden Ram Award, and that's that we implemented, and they were the first recipients. So once again, with that, Lorraine, thank you. Mimi and Fred, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Giving us a pathways for Monday and what we can do starting Monday. Thank you.
thank you.
That's right. Excellent. So thank you very much. Really appreciate this again. Thank you, Fred, Mimi, Lorraine. We'll definitely stay in touch.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. The next, the last point of the symposium is our evaluation talk. This is really a conversation that we as coaches would like to have with you, with attendees. We did a little bit of a debrief yesterday as well. We just would like to hear from you what it is that you think could be done differently, what could be improved. Has the symposium met your expectations? What are your thoughts if you were to advise us as to how to improve it, how to make it better for next time around? I've heard really a number of great, very supporting comments, and again, the technology seems to have worked just fine, which is always a great plus, right, for any such event. So again, if there is anything as far as the content is concerned, or the delivery, the selection of the breakout sessions, the questions about keynote, or even today's presentations, if you have any, we are all ears. Okay, so P.F. Anderson, the technology did not exactly work fine for everyone. Would you, please elaborate. We don't want to leave it hanging. Would you please tell us what the hiccup with the technology was, if you could elaborate on your comment?
I often am in multiple Zoom meetings at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that this event being in Zoom events,
Mm-hmm.
it had to be opened before I could open any of my other meetings. which
Okay.
meant that if I was already in a meeting when I came here, I could not join this meeting, or I had to leave my other meeting and then rejoin. I tried to work around this by using the web platform, but in the web platform, the captions and chat and Q&A were not accessible in the same way that they are in Zoom app.
Okay.
So,
All right.
so there were a lot of struggles in trying to get things to work. Today has been fine because I'm only in this meeting.
That's right. That's right. Well, again, that's a danger if you want to attend 2 or 3 meetings at the same time. So that's just your preference. But to be honest, I don't know if there is anything that we as coaches can do about that specifically. If that's I mean, you know, that's an issue with Zoom, and it's kind of like, you know, if I were to think of a physical building, right? If I want to attend, you know, 3 different meetings at the same time, I have to get up, open the door, and just kind of like run from room to room. So I think that's a similar experience here. Maybe that's why the difficulty is there. So again, I don't want to be you know, defending or saying anything about Zoom, but on our end, I think we did all we could to make sure that you know, symposium is accessible. Susie's listening, but again, I don't want to put her on the spot here. I don't know if this is really our issue that we can resolve.
Jarek, I am here.
Okay, thanks.
PF, I'm not certain what it is, but yesterday I was in all 11 sessions at the same time. So it may be a matter of bandwidth. It may be a matter of your institute settings. I'm really not certain. But I would check with your institution's technology department and see if they can come up with a solution.
Yep. Okay. Excellent. Very nice. Thank you, Antoinette, for your comments. Anybody else would like to say anything to us as coaches, so that again we know how to improve? We're good. Well, let me see here. If you have any more questions, comments, I think I put our email address enough times in the chat. It's info@coaches.institute. So please don't hesitate to let us know if you would like to join us for more conversation. Please be on the lookout for next for this semester's Friday SLO talk lineup that's going to come out in February. And again, all the materials from the symposium are going to be presented, are going to be published on Fresno City College Professional Development website, and then there is coaches blog and other venues.